Now, hi, everybody, welcome. This is Aurora Lessons for Full Spectrum Humans. And this is a supplementary curriculum, we could call it extracurricular, that is going to be about really the origins of Satanism and how that relates to the origins of Judeo-Christianity. Before I dive into this new insight way of sharing, which is important to prepare everyone for Galactic History, which will be next week, and that will be a marathon event in our same time space when we usually meet 2 p.m., but we'll go through to 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. So carbo load the day before. You're going to want to eat all of your pastas and good stuff to be ready, at least if you're walking on a treadmill for 6 hours, okay? So we'll be ready. That would be amazing. So this is in preparation for talking about galactic history. And these are some insights that I'd like to share that I received when I was driving across the desert on my way back from Sedona. But before I jump into that, we were chatting a little bit informally before we began our class. And everyone, let me just admit someone to the meeting. Hold on a second. People were interested in how did my dance go, because I dance for everyone. I dance for myself. I dance for the world. First, we had a wonderful group of people. I really, really love the retreat center space where it was. It's at a place called The Field at Oak Creek, and this is just outside of Sedona. And it was very beautiful to be there because in December, that is actually the height of when the entire world wants to be visiting Sedona. So just know that previously I had gone in hotter times of the year when for the hotel rates are lower also. But in December and New Year's Eve, like it's difficult to find parking any place. Just know all of the hiking places are full of people. So I made sure to give the participants that came to my retreat small experiences, like for small groups, not big giant groups with a public crowd or whatever. So we went to a small watering hole that only locals know about, and some other places that are kind of off the beaten track. So it was very, very nice. And we got to do all of our profound dance work as well. The retreat center has an amazing dance space that is specifically for these activities. So that's what we did most of our time spent in the dance actual building there. All right, so we usually measure Vladimir Lasagna time waves on a scale of 1 to 10. And on this particular occasion, we danced some time waves that were, sorry, I don't know what I'm looking at here. I'm just pressing buttons. Here we go. Magnitude 111 and 78. And I think also we had a 57 in there too. Some enormous grand scale time waves. So what does that mean? Not only were we very energetic and we were contributing to weaving the tapestry of time and creating these amazing time events, but also that we are surfers coordinating ourselves with these larger harmonics and patterns that are going on. And so there were some very, very large things to try to coordinate. And these are things that you're going to see restructuring your world, things that are about the economy, but also things that are about government. And now I'm going to segue into what we're going to talk about today, our curriculum for today, which is basically the origins of Satanism. In what you want to fix in the world, when you really look at the common denominator, it is Satanism. The current money system, and even using things like the shiny rocks like silver or gold, that is essentially a satanic system. And so even as I talk about moving away from occult dollars, that is a positive movement, and moving back towards, the origin of what humans use as markers for wealth, which is gold and silver, would be positive in the sense that you would be less exploited by the inflationary and hyperinflationary, fraudulent, nonsense world of the, world banks and the central banks. You and many other people in this world are now educated and perceptive enough to recognize that what is known as traditional banking is largely fraudulent. Banks act as if they sell something that they don't actually have in order to increase the supposed amount of wealth or abundance that they have. And they do things that would be considered illegal for you to do in terms of their pretending and imaginary wealth that they pretend to have and then pretend to spend and get away with it. And same thing with governments, that you recognize it's not just the banks, but it's also the governments who are in like the death grasp with banks. Like they both are are in charge, but they're both struggling for supremacy in your world. Governments also require the presence of money in order to be able to, do their extortion, have power over you. And money really goes back to ancient Sumeria. Ancient Sumeria we'll talk about linear history as opposed to intuitive history. And so linear history is what you learn in the school books right now and what is consensually recognized in your world as all the stuff that happened, but it is an incredibly limited slice of the historical pie. You actually have deep antiquity that goes much further back than, roughly 5,000 or 6,000 years of world history. This tiny, tiny slice. That's like the paint on top of the paint of the most recent, layer of reality, because you definitely have civilization that predates 10,000 years ago. You have civilization that on this Earth linear timeline that predates 26,000 years ago. But then also you go into a muddy time when it is post catastrophe Atlantis, but prehistory of linear timelines of what you presently know. So it's difficult to talk about time. Pardon me for my difficult use of time language. All right. But I'm going to make a lot of contrasts today also without any conscience or guilt or whatever. The contrasting your present very, very screwed up world, which is patriarchal and which was set up by males, and contrast that with the way that things were done in what I call pre-Pharaonic Egypt, the time that I'm going to start to bring us to as you bring your tendril of attention to the time when the pyramids were still active power centers. All right. So I talked about this when we were at our beautiful outdoor excursion in Sedona, talking about the presence that really sanctified the presence of the pyramids in the ancient world and was a civilizing feature, and how this became hijacked and corrupted. So first, we're going to get in our time machines, pull back hard on the lever, and we're going to go not only 26,000 years ago, we're going to go even deeper into antiquity. So really now we are at a time where in linear time, Atlantis has already had a catastrophe. I am not here because I am Aurora and I have already ascended. I am not in Atlantis where you are having this catastrophe, but I haven't experienced it and it hasn't actually happened yet. I know your brains are going to liquefy and it's only the beginning of class. It's only 7 minutes into class. But I was not present there, but I was present after the catastrophe in the sense of being an otherworldly, supernatural, being of the celestial realm or of the stars that occasionally did these very real light shows. So when I was in Sedona, people were asking me about this too, what did the light shows look like, or what was the experience like in Egypt after Atlantis? So first I have to portray to you what that whole entire area of the world was like. So there was an umbrella of civilization, a penumbra of energy within which the emanations of the Great Pyramid civilized that world. I keep using that word. The emanations not only lit a light bulb, as you may have seen things like Tesla, the inventor, not the fraudulent, fake cyber people of the present world who don't really have very advanced technology at all. But the original inventor, Tesla, used to have these types of light bulbs that he would hold within a force field of energy that would illuminate without a wire that plugs into the wall. That's the type of energy that was flowing through ancient Egypt in a time after Atlantis. So in Atlantis, we lived in a very civilized time that would be considered a matriarchy, but also it was an anarchy. We didn't really have government, so it wasn't really specifically a matriarchy. And also in that time, we did not have the dynamics and prerogatives that emanate from your biological necessities of sexual reproduction. So we did not make babies back then the way that you guys make babies now. As soon as consciousness changed and you went from being light eaters to being mortal beings who give birth, the whole entire power dynamic of having bodies and what your bodies do changed. And of course, it's appropriate to have divisions of labor because women are busy making babies. And then they're also busy breastfeeding and taking care of babies. And so they are not available to be able to do other things. And if you want to have people in the future, you're going to want to prioritize women making babies and women taking care of babies. But we are not talking about the dark ages. You guys know from after like whatever the year zero, like basically the year 1000 to the year 2000, that's like the dark ages. So like, wait, what about the Enlightenment in the 1800s? I'm like, tell me, like, it's still dark. All right. The mostly still dark times. I got to drink water. That was a joke. And I like the type of jokes that you have to announce as being actually funny. But the dark ages in Europe were when women had zero rights and they had like 12 babies. They were pregnant their whole entire life and had zero control over their own body. And you equate that with what it is to live in this type of primitive way. That is not truthful. So even though that is close to your recorded memory, you can remember 1000 years ago and remember the time of people of that time. They were not an evolved time. They were not a civilized time. The way that they treated women was horrible and not the way you're supposed to treat women. So I have asked you to hop into the time machine and pull back on the lever and go deep, deep, deep back into time and go to a time when the pyramids were still functional as power sources and civilizing apparatuses. And we also have to talk about who built them and why. So you had initially, after the end of Atlantis, barbarity, just barbarism everywhere. And then you have the erection of these pyramids that are anti-barbarity apparatuses. And they were created by highly civilized otherworldly creatures that you could think of them as aliens, interdimensional or otherworldly creatures. You would say that they are benevolent in their intentions, but they are semi-benevolent because also like they were kind of complicit in the fall of Atlantis. Like they weren't protecting things and they didn't do a good job, because if they were protecting and did a good job, then you wouldn't have fallen. So they are very questionable, but it seems good. Like, oh, like you guys had a bad fall. Let me come and Humpty Dumpty, anti-Humpty Dumpty you and get you guys back together. But you have to question about why they didn't prevent the fall or what are the circumstances within which they could do this reconstruction, because the fall was an invasion of the Satanics that were on Mars. And when they came and they destroyed, ancient concurrent Atlantis, when you had that catastrophe, the bad guys did not leave. So whatever was built after the bad guys came here was built either with their knowledge or possibly with their partial consent or possibly as a confrontation of them, but in a conflict. So it's not like they built the pyramids on a completely pristine world. Not like the bad guys came in, did a bunch of bad shit, and then swept out and left. And then you had to reconstruct. That was not what happened. The bad guys came in, became a genetic mishmash with you, and then stuck around. And then a different group of beings were like, I think that we will try to help you in some way. So first you have to even consider the motivations and the context within which this supposed help has arrived. And pardon me while I just continue to hydrate here. My voice is still tired from talking so much at the retreat. Okay, so the most important thing that you need to know for this storytelling, and it all comes from my internal knowledge, not from things that I've read or that I know about from other sacred texts or anything like that. There was a presence inside of the Great Pyramid. So the pyramids in Egypt there were 3 of them, and I think the main one was the biggest one that was white. Then there's a smaller one that was black and a smaller one that was yellow or golden. All right. So those 2 were smaller and auxiliary and performed different function. The main pyramid that you guys know that has the king's chamber in it, you got to name it something different, because that what you thought was a sarcophagus was not a sarcophagus. It was a container for like a light entity. And I have been calling this light entity the Shekinah because I don't have a better word for it, but I recognize that that word has a lot of Talmudic connotations, and that's not exactly what I'm trying to evoke. So please forgive me that this is just my best word that I've come up with to be able to speak about this. And we might want to come up with something better. But basically that unresolved consciousness, which is an immortal or extremely long-lived eternal being, is why you have Satanism in this world. It's why you have screwed up genetics of people who have been from a particular country that has the flag of blue and white stripes on it. And also it's why you had animal sacrifice and wars and the bankers running wars. You're like, chunka. Well, I just laid a big heavy trip on you. I did. And also, so the origins of the Bible mesh perfectly with the origins of gold. And the Bible is like the original Torah. And that's from roughly 5,700 years ago. So even when you look at the current Jewish religion, which is an outgrowth of these original genetically modified people that I'm going to tell you about today, they count like their calendar as beginning roughly 5,700 years ago. I don't know what the exact date is in the Jewish calendar. It's 57 something something. And so according to linear and let's say academic history, what is considered truthful in academia, it's the oldest religion. Like it goes back to the most, it's the oldest practiced religion. Even though Zoroastrianism and some of these other ones are further back, but you do have this very long-lived document in the original Torah. And the original Torah is the first 5 books of Moses. And you guys also know it as the Old Testament. And then, of course, there is the New Testament, which is a response and a critical outgrowth of the original Judaism. But where did the original Judaism come from? It comes from this original presence that was the civilizing presence way back in the time of ancient Egypt. Now, before I talk about the Shekinah, I would call that divine feminine. That's the best word I have for it. So I will characterize this being by saying 100% light entity, like a frequency entity, not a fleshy person at all. Polarity positive in being genuinely well-intentioned. When I tune in on this presence, I genuinely get a sense that the light entity came to give, to be benevolent, to help, to try to fix, and not as a malevolency or as an exploiter or anything like that. I think that should be clear. And I think that I'm a pretty good, like, literate person, like when you can read someone and know. There's always the possibility maybe I'm wrong, or maybe things have radically changed. A person who started out good and has radically changed, but I will give the benefit of the doubt. And I do perceive the initial motivations for this light entity to come into the world and reside within that pyramid, I perceive as being positive, genuinely wanting to help in some way. But I will give my critique later, which I developed this critique while I was, again, driving home from Sedona and thinking about this whole thing and really placing my tendril of attention on this whole historical period. So this is a very, very, I keep on using the word benevolent, positive, like kind of like the sun, like blindingly bright, light body. And that presence lived inside of the pyramid voluntarily, coming here like on assignment, which is why I kind of relate. But I will also give my critique later of how badly she messed up, but I did not mess up my assignment. In what is known in the king's chamber, there's like what they call a sarcophagus, like a granite box that is roughly the size of a human being, and it had a lid. So that is where the power source would be. So this power source was not like a hunk of uranium, not merely like an insensate mineral or something that did not have motivation or sense of self. It's a living presence, something that very much has motivation and a sense of self, and was there, like I said, voluntarily, or let's say conscientiously, to perform a task, not by accident at all. And so that was a living creature that was light, that was inside of there. And that's the main component for that pyramid to actually be a power station. More components are the water that flows underneath there, the natural aquifer, the type of stone that was around it, the shape of the polygons of the crystalline structure of the stone, and of course the golden capstone, and the orientation to the land and to the stars. All of this was very, very intentional and necessary. But it's like having, like imagine if you have something like a CD player. You have the laser and you have the place where you put the CD, but you have the housing for that. But then the CD is where you actually have the information. You have to put that onto there and then have the light shine on it in just the right way, at just the right angle to get the information or light or wisdom out of there. So the giant pyramid was very similar, where you have to have the orientations correct, you have to have the beams of light correct, you have to have the star connections correct, and then you also have to have that light presence inside of there. But when it was functional, the entire inner part of the pyramid was like flooded with light. So it's not like you could, as a human being, easily walk up what is known as like that ramp upward to the king's chamber, which is like this giant pavilion inside of it. You could not be inside of there. Like you would be face meltingly irradiated. And the type of radiation actually is like a plasma being. That's the best word I have. Plasma being. Ta-da! Like the sun. If you're in the presence of the sun, like, yes, it is very hot, but and also it is plasma of intelligence. And of course, if you are a purely functional, good person with your chakras perfectly aligned and you are yourself a light being, you could be in that presence of plasma and you would not be liquefied, but you would have to be an ascended master of the highest order and have every molecule of your body like perfect. And then you would be able to like walk on in and everything would be fine. So very unlikely that there was anyone in the time of Moses who was that divinely aligned and perfect to be able to be in the presence of this being to steal it, because we have to talk about that moment of stealing when this lid would have been opened up and when this light being, plasma being would have been somehow scooped out or coerced or whatever, hijacked from there into what you guys know as the Ark of the Covenant, a portable, radiation-proof, supposedly tabernacle that they could put this light being into. But I will also tell you, if you read the directions for how to build the Ark of the Covenant in Exodus or whatever, and apologies, my lips are very chapped. I'm just going to keep on slathering on. They're spraying like glyphosate in the sky, and it makes one's lips very chapped. But the instructions that are in the Bible for how to build the Ark of the Covenant is not very impressive in terms of the magnitude of intensity of radiation. Like you have this giant stone encasement in the size of the Great Pyramid. The mass is, of course, tons and tons and tons of rock. So to block radiation, that is extremely effective. You have, walls that are whatever, several hundreds of meters thick. But the carrying case they made, according to the directions for the Bible, is made out of gopher wood and then like lined with a thin amount of gold. Most of the gold for that apparatus was held in the angelic, like seraphim type of winged creatures that are at the top that act as more like capacitors. So think of it like, like in a light bulb, like, you have like most of the stuff is the energy where it's kind of like screws into the base. And then you have a tiny amount of metal elsewhere. Like what I'm trying to get across to you is that from my engineering mind, I'm like, that wouldn't do SHIT and it would melt. Like the power of this radiation being from this plasma being was so powerful that it took like a giant pyramid to encase it. If you put it in this little gopherwood box lined with a little bit of gold, like that thing would have melted. That thing would have melted. So please file these very real things away. And I will tell you, I'm always the worst person to watch a movie or a TV series with, because I will come up with the most amazing rational points where I'm like, something, if they put that Shekinah in that gopherwood box, that thing's going to melt out before they even get halfway across the Red Sea. They're not even going to get out of Egypt and their thing is going to melt already. So believe me, I am looking at all the giant holes within the narratives that we have to look at here. But we also need to go back to the characterization of what was the civilization like before this power object was stolen from the Great Pyramids. So it was what you would call a matriarchy, in that it was female-centered and women ran the place, but different even than your current description of what a matriarchy is. Like some of you may remember back to ancient Greece, which was a matriarchy, but I would say of an imbalanced sense, pretty much similar to the patriarchy, where you had like an out-of-balance power system, but women ruled and male lives were disposable and like condescended to. That's not the matriarchy that I'm talking about. So I'm not just talking about invert what you presently have in terms of the patriarchy. In the patriarchy, you have power abuse and you have resources abuse also. Like somebody's musical chairs, somebody's always going home crying because there's not enough resources. Matriarchy, as it is described, what I'm trying to describe, the world of civilization, where you did not have poverty. You did not have a game of musical chairs that was set up intentionally to have some people out in the cold. That happened in ancient Sumeria, which is after the time that I'm telling you about. So they started to use gold in ancient Sumeria after what I am describing. So we'll get to that in the time machine too. But you're back in a time now where women controlled all of the resources and they were not a-holes about it. They actually were very, very good at making sure that everybody had what they needed. Not, again, like some kind of gross communism, socialism, which is not how you make sure that everybody has what they need. Communism, socialism is how you have exploitation with a small group of people benefiting and the rest of the people being very unhappy peasants. So it's so hard for me to describe this to you because you have no reference point. You have no historical or cultural reference point for a time when people did not treat each other like a-holes, when people actually collaborated in societies and created abundance for everyone. And that is pretty much what you had. So you might have to think of it as a tribal time, like maybe from North America, a tribal time. And that in North America was a time that was maternal or matriarchal. But this is even thousands or tens of or hundreds of thousands of years before that time. Okay, so very, very long time ago. And when you think of the indigenous people of North America, you also think super low tech. That super low tech happened after they turned off the pyramid. All right. So this is a time when it was not high tech, like you have transhumanist technology, but definitely people use technology because you needed it, because this was after Atlantis was catastrophized and people needed to learn how to live. You didn't have your natural psychic powers. The barbarians lived like, again, rubbing two sticks together to be able to try to stay warm. This was a different effort. How do you structure society where there's going to be males and females and you're going to have resources? How do you do this in like a collaborative, equitable way? That is what that Shekinah presence did. Emanated outward the ideas of how to live in a benevolent, collaborative, and equitable way. People needed to be socialized and taught how to do this. So think of her as like the lunch lady, looking at everybody playing on the playground, be like, no, don't hit, don't throw sand, be nice, you guys play together, and doing stuff like that, except they didn't need those remedial lessons. So by the time that that civilization was built and that civilizing presence was there, people genuinely learned how to live with each other in respect. Women were absolutely empowered to choose their sexual partners. This is why it was a civilization. When this satanic shift happened and the power source was stolen from the Great Pyramid, what happened was women lost the ability to say no or no thank you to sexual reproduction. Before that, not in the areas where it was barbaric, but in the areas of civilization, women were in charge and they got to say who they did and did not want to have sex with, when they did or did not want to have sex, how many times, and whether they wanted to have babies or procreate. That was a completely different world that has really not been modeled or created again in this time and place that you know as linear history. And it was the best time to ever be alive as a human. I was not alive as a human. I was alive as a supernatural presence that sometimes did awesome light shows in the sky, better than any kind of Pink Floyd laser light show at the planetarium. We did natural light shows. So I'm Aurora. I did light shows in the sky. You know what I'm talking about again. Sorry, my chapped lips here. We did light shows in the sky. And this was different than like taking acid or mushrooms and then listening to Pink Floyd and seeing crazy colors. These were all informative patterns, much like what you see me wear and paint. So these were not just random, beautiful lights. These were informative patterns, and people didn't have to take a drug to feel these uplifting feelings. And the whole entire town or community would be out under the sky experiencing this. And it was totally in conjunction with the divine feminine presence that is at the center of the pyramid structure. And this is in an ancient time. So these were uplifting experiences beyond any rave or whatever, whatever rock concert performance. These were uplifting and profound experiences. And everybody went and everybody had their own experiences. Like it was not uniform, but so there was uniqueness, but everybody would be like, it would be the only thing that would be talked about the next day. You would be like, wow, what did you experience? I saw this and I saw this. And so you can also comprehend that as that civilization degraded and devolved, those very real first person experiences of being immersed in divinity or directly connected with the stars became devolved into the pantheon of what you know as the Egyptian gods. So it used to be strict solar worship or stellar worship with no intermediaries and no astral bullshit. But then there got to be a lot of astral bullshit. That was all of the things that have like the head of a cat or the head of a cow and the body of a woman and these weird hybrids and chimeras and things like that, already devolving and degrading the message. And with each one of those degraded and devolved images and astral figures came a degraded priesthood, someone who's like the gatekeepers who says, like, if you want to talk to God that has cat face, gonna have to talk to us first. And there will be bribes and you're going to have to give us stuff, and then we will pass your messages along. And that's also when you start to develop in that culture the mania of mummification in an attempt to create an eternal or extended life. And I've already talked to you about that. Something that started out as a genuine essay into how to live eternally and then got degraded into, if you are rich, you can afford a tomb. If you're rich, you can afford to be all of the wrappings and the resins, and then also the magical incantations that will allow you to be happy in your afterlife. And someone did recommend to me that I watch this TV show that's a modern TV show called Upload that I only just watched a little bit of, but it's a very apt metaphor. People who upon their death are digitally uploaded into, a fantasy, like a dreamlike world where there's everything that you want, in-app purchases, everything you want, but there are in-app purchases that must be paid for by the living. So in ancient pre-pharaonic Egypt, and then in what you know as pharaonic Egypt, where the pharaohs ruled, at a certain point, the living had to tithe to the dead. Be like, okay, my dead ancestors are going to want to have some of this rice, so put it on the altar, give them some of these pomegranates, put it on the altar, give them some of this oil, put it on the altar, because if you didn't get fed by the living, you would be like this guy in the Upload show. You'd be a hungry ghost in the afterlife with no one who's living sustaining you in your capacity to be a dead presence. So you can comprehend how the lower astral got filled up with garbage and trash and then devolved, and also their mania grew. So it became no longer this pristine system. But way back when, like, I was a supernatural presence working with these light shows and working with, civilizing the world, it was an amazing time. And there was a lot of hope for humanity. And so again, it was considered very, very sensible for women to control the resources because women were involved in the baby making. And when you have babies, you got to have a house. You got to have like if you're not making babies, you can be like nomadic, just kind of go around and do, you don't have to have stability. Like if you have babies, like you want to stay in the same place for a long time and you want to educate them. You don't want to be, like traipsing all over and having to reestablish yourself. You want to have like security and stability and know that you're staying in one place for a long amount of time and you're very focused on like building for the future. As opposed to adventuring or looking for something new. Like you're not like having to have novelty. You want to keep stuff the same and you want it to be stable and you want to plan for the future. And that's what the women did. They were involved in like very selectively choosing their partners based on their own needs for whether they would be a good husband. And they don't necessarily only have to get someone who's a good provider. In the patriarchy, males have all of the money, and that's why you have to go to them they will be a good provider. Like you're a woman, you have no money, but you have this amazing stargate called a womb, and they'll be like, okay, good, have babies with me, and I will give you money. And this is mostly what you guys call marriage. But back then, marriage was very different because it was really only at the woman's prerogative, and it was really only the person that she wanted to create new life with, and really only under her circumstances. So right now, what you have is 5,000 years of de-evolution where not the best males created the next generation. The richest males created the next generation. And some of these rich males, like they are not the best specimens. They don't necessarily have the best looking face. They don't necessarily have the best teeth. They don't necessarily have the strongest muscles. They don't necessarily have the best intellect. They simply are rich and they got money. And look at some of the specimens in your present world who are rich people who are not good looking or extraordinary in their physical presence in any way. And they are able to attract some very, amazing, elegant looking women. Even some rulers of nations that you may be familiar with. I'm thinking of like Trump and Melania. Like these two people would never be in the same bed together if not for the presence of large amounts of money and assets. All right. I'm being so like selective in all of this, but you guys get it. Yes. So it's normal to you, trophy wives, out of balance levels of attractiveness, women who would never consider a man a good physical specimen for procreation, but for the large amount of money that he contains in his bank account. None of that was an aspect of decision making in terms of breeding and the sacredness of bringing forward the next generation. Because it's not just about breeding, like make a lot of rabbits, make a lot of chickens, make a lot of whatever. You have to make the right ones. In your civilization process, you got to choose the right husbands and make the right babies and raise them in the right way so that you actually have less barbaric, more civilized subsequent generations. So let me talk about when I was at the retreat center, this wonderful owner or co-owner was showing us his candle making studio where he works exclusively in this beautiful beeswax, not all from his own hives, but from hives that are in the area. And he was telling us about his experience being a beekeeper. So he's got these wild hives, and he told us that he really likes and prefers that method of beekeeping as opposed to what most people are doing these days, and he calls them toy bees. The bees that you can access commercially are already degraded in their genetics, and they are not as strong as the wild bees. The degraded, commercially available bees and beehives, their communities, are so susceptible to all these natural things. Like they need to have a fungicide, and they need to have a miticide, and they need to have a this and a that. And if things are not good, then they die. And also, my friend said, like, if you take off the box of the honey hive, if they're these commercially bred bees, he calls them, they're like sheep. They just kind of crawl in themselves and do their thing down there, and they look up and they're like, oh, look, the roof is gone, and I'm just still crawling around and doing nothing. Like they are not very mentally present. But when he works with the wild hives and he takes off the lid, the bees all swarm out. They're like, who are you? We are mad. What are you doing? I'm a wild feral animal and you're in my face. Very, very different responses. And so, yeah, he said he doesn't have to do anything to the wild beehives. Like they just make their honey and he goes out there and he collects it every couple of seasons or whatever. But these other hives, they're so delicate, they can barely even be alive after 1 year. Like it's hard for you to keep them going year after year because there's no vitality in the genetics of the hive. And he concluded this TED talk at his 5-minute presentation there, but because he educated us so much, telling us that the real problem is when the sedated, like sheep-like, corporately available bees, the males do get out and they sometimes mate with the females that are in the wild hives. And then you dilute the wildness. And this was a real, real thing that hit home, that it's not just a problem of lower quality genetics and lower quality vitality in some of these mass manufactured colonies or families or tribes, but also that they get out and they dilute the rest of the bees who otherwise would be able to live without technological interventions, without reliance upon technology and artificial stuff. All right. So first of all, do you relate to this? Does this feel similar to the distinction made in humanity right now between the highly vaccinated population of children that are always going to their quote unquote well visits, getting all of their injections, and then, of course, fictionally, so that way I can talk about this openly on this captured platform, coming up with all of their fictional earaches, fictional eczema, fictional autoimmune diseases, fictional digestive problems, fictional spasmodic diseases, like fictional problems that happen fictionally from these things that happen to keep children healthy. It does not keep them healthy, fictionally. Of course, only in this book club discussion that I'm telling you about really seems to degrade their natural vitality quite a lot. And some parents run their own control experiments where they're like, yep, these are the bees that I gave the injections to. And then these are the bees that just run around and they do nothing except, what bees have done for millennia. And they do much better than the other bees. Okay. So all of that in order to say that at the time of the civilizing process with the Great Pyramid, you had a variety of different types of humans on Earth, not just one species. You had bees that were getting civilized, bees that were run by the divine female presence, that were growing and evolving and creating stability in their use of resources. But then you had those who were on the outskirts. And I have given this teaching before. So the ancient Egyptian hierarchy was determined by your psychic abilities. If you had good psychic abilities, then you could be a noble, a priest, a prince, a princess, someone who can talk to divine otherworldly creatures. If you didn't have that capability, and it's definitely a genetic possibility, it's also a gift. If you didn't have that as a gift, you were not valued in that society. Like here in this society today, you're valued if you have technological proclivities or engineering capabilities. You're not valued that much if you know how to, like, whatever, plant tomatoes or dig a fence. Those aren't, the most prioritized activities here in this time and place. In the time of ancient Egypt, the activities that were the most valued were not typing on a computer, they were using your psychic powers. And that includes using your psychic powers to be telepathic with other humans or to far speak with other civilizations that are in other times and places, because again, the light show that they were all very, very tuned in on and very aware of, and other forms of artistry, using your psychic powers to be able to create physical beauty, sonic beauty, lasting edifices, like, to carve something or to build something or to be an architect. These are all like very, very high level positions, even being a scribe and being literate and being able to write and draw, and drafting capabilities of being able to measure and create, like blueprints. Huge positive stuff there. And of course, civilized planning, like how, if you can see the future because you are psychic, like you can plan for stuff. You can be like, well, we need to build a road, or we need to build an aqueduct, or we need to do something because I can see that we need to do something, right? So people ran the world very sensibly then, and it was the people who had psychic powers. And the key point that I'm telling you this is because the people that did not have psychic powers were relegated to manual labor. Their life was set up for them. It's like, oh, you don't have psychic powers, you will push a wheelbarrow, and that's your job. And their job was to like help with building materials, like a wheelbarrow full of stones or hay, like stuff for, these traditional adobe ways of making bricks and things like that. Yeah, and they were not respected. And those are the people that you guys know from the story of the Israelites as the people who would become the Jewish people and the Israelites. But first, you have to ask, where did those people come from? They didn't just come from nowhere. Let's now delve into stories of the Bible with Aurora. So this goes back to what you know as the patriarchs of the original Bible. That's Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The story goes that Abraham lived in the Babylonian city of Ur, and he didn't like the idols that his father created and that his community worshipped. And there's an apocryphal story of him smashing the idols. And he was like, don't worship these idols. They're just stupid idols. And everyone in his community said, you are naughty. Go away. And he went away and he communed with what he thought was the true God, which was actually Satan, who said, good job smashing those idols. You're right. Everyone in your community is worshiping wrong. You should worship the right way, which is to cut off a part of your private parts in worshiping me. I'm going to need that blood from you and from all of your descendants. If you do this, agree to me now, I will make you as multiplicitous, sorry, I'm not saying it right, as the stars in the sky. You're going to be the chosen people. You're going to fictionally run Hollywood and various different media companies and be powerful people. What do you say, kid? And Abraham was like, sign me up. I am all about genital mutilation for myself and agreeing for the future. And thus circumcision was born. Now we must fast forward 90 years, because Abraham, of course, had a lot of ups and downs in his life, but nothing went better than when he listened to what he thought was the divine Lord, but was actually Satan. And his life went in interesting directions. Like he found himself living in isolation away from human society as a very, very old man with his very, very old wife, who was named Sarah. And she was also like 90 years old, and they had both been told by this satanic voice in the sky that no one else could hear, but that they could hear, that they would have a baby. And they got to be 90 years old, living in faith. This is going to happen. Except Abraham didn't have that much faith. And he also probably wanted to have sex really badly. And he had sex with his maid, whose name was Ham. This is all fictionally, of course. And Ham got pregnant and actually did have a baby, but it wasn't the right evil baby for the satanic Lord who was pretending to be God. And so the God Lord said to Abraham, you had the wrong baby with the wrong person, and you're going to have to banish that baby. So that Ham baby ended up becoming the origin of Islam and went off and was only somewhat mutilated by the Sky Lord. And so it wasn't completely mutilated. So then eventually what the Sky Lord Satan did was create a nice IVF germination embryo and implant that into Abraham's 90-year-old wife as a miraculous conception, got pregnant at age 90 and had the baby who would be the next generation. That's Isaac. And that was a genetically modified early lineage. And then you get into the whole thing of the voice in the sky that tells him to sacrifice his son, but he does not going to sacrifice his son and says instead, start the religion known as animal sacrifice. They did lots of animal sacrifice in the barbaric realms outside of the penumbra of civilization, but not within the area of civilization. This is big stuff. So in that post-Atlantic time, the ones who were civilized did not kill organisms as a supposed worship of God, the divine presence. What the civilized Egyptian culture was about was actually embodiment of the divine. When I say this, it has nothing at all to do with divine, like a possession, a demonic thing, a satanic thing. It was very, very beautiful. Supernatural people and beings of my caliber came into human containers. Like I'm a permanent presence here. I even wash my own dishes. But back then, you did not wash your own dishes. When you came into the flesh for a few moments during a ritual or an amazing experience, you were given like the most amazing things to eat and drink, to explore the senses, and to be able to explore sexuality and sensuality. Again, this was completely consensual, and sometimes amazing children were conceived in that moment of positive, benevolent, divine inhabitation. But again, this was only with a certain like good, done with consent, the way that you have friends, like you first develop a proper relationship, develop a proper expectation. Like none of this was exploitation. So it's even difficult for me to tell you about it because you're so used to the satanic world that emerged as the inversion and negative exploitation of things that used to be very pure and very positive. So the way that they worshipped was by being a beautiful, perfect container for something that is larger to come in. And then that something larger would come in during these, like a ritual, a ceremony, a very, very special thing. But none of it involved killing. Isn't that amazing? None of it involved killing. Like I told you later on, they're like, oh, we've got dead relatives and we have to give them something. But even then, it was more offerings the way that you currently have the Hindus who just have an altar. So like you're not killing, but you're putting out some extra rice or some extra kebabs or whatever you're eating for dinner. Like here, this is for the dead. But that's still not at the level of what the barbaric Satanists ended up erecting, which you are aware of as the origins of the Jewish religion and as the beginning of the Bible. So I'm speaking now as a biblical scholar. I hope that I will not be hated upon by the algorithm or the platform that I'm attempting to share these things on, because all that I'm saying is very accurate about the origins of what is your present barbaric religion, which is really not respectful at all. So that whole thing with the genetic modification of Abraham's child, and then the need for animal sacrifice, the need for circumcision as a blood sacrifice, and the need for animal sacrifice. These things represent a different otherworldly creature that was trying to take over the benevolent matriarchy that myself and other good supernatural presences were creating here. And Satan and the satanics were different. And basically what Satan did was from that original genetic modification that you know in the time of Abraham. So if you read the Bible, it's like a lot of stuff happened, like so and so begat so and so begat so and so begat so and so begat so and so, and then they went down into the land of Egypt, and they're like according to the Bible, you will hear the story where it's like the damsels, poor us, we were enslaved, it's not our fault, it wasn't good times, it was famine, and we had to work and didn't do things like it. That's a very different portrayal than what actually happened. What actually happened was like they didn't have their psychic shit together, and they could not do stuff that the other people around them could do, and they were economically disadvantaged and treated like second-class citizens. And then what happened was Satan, the satanic space races, came along and was like, hey, kid, chomping your cigar, I see that you're really living as outsiders in the civilized world. And all these women are running the place and they got all the money, even though we didn't really use money. And aren't you dissatisfied? And wouldn't you like to take all that stuff that they have and be like them and be powerful and beautiful like them? And that is exactly what they did. They made an agreement. Those people then became extra genetically modified to be able to hear the voice of Satan as if it is God, like in their own mind. And that's who they call Jehovah. And then you're up to date with the story of the Exodus. So now we're at the movie from the 1950s with Charlton Heston, and he's Moses, and all of these myths and everything like that. But basically, like, he's a rebel against the Egyptian Empire. Even though he was born as a prince into the Egyptian Empire, there's lots of stories too. Like he wasn't circumcised, and they kind of like he wasn't really in the club. But that's now I'm up to the parts of the movie that don't make sense. So the official story is that, well, they don't actually say in the Bible that they stole the Shekinah and that that's what went into the Ark of the Covenant. That is my inner seeing, and that is what I know. It's a non sequitur, just like I tell you about the original connection to DNA, where like here you are in your non-degraded DNA and here you are in your degraded mortal DNA, and there's really no connection. So there's another non sequitur here where the narrative does not fit together. You have the Shekinah in the pyramid acting as a civilizing ray, even though at that point there were, the barbarians of the second-class citizens, and also a lot of false worship of I want to say polygons, polytheistic, nonsense, fraudulent gods. You already had some degradation in the Egyptian culture, but theoretically, when you take off that stone lid, you should have faces melt. You should have anybody who is evil or who is not 100% an ascended master of totally angelic purity standing around that thing. Be like, that's it. You have lost corporeal integrity. You can't be in the presence of this plasma and keep yourself together. That's what should have happened. In fact, I told you, even ascending and going upward to what you know as the king's chamber, you would already have been liquefied. You can't even get up there. So that's one of the first non sequiturs. One of the other non sequiturs is or are, even if you're the super benevolent presence of goodness, you might be like, well, like as soon as they, like you might think, I don't have to have any martial arts skills because I would just incinerate anyone bad who manages to get even close to me. That's fair, because if you are the sun, it's like saying, like, if you're flying towards the sun with bad intentions, the sun is going to be like, I will melt you now. Like, you can't even get close to me. But even beyond that, I started, as I was driving home from Sedona recently, talking with this presence of the Shekinah, which I would say is kind of like in a coma or in a non-empowered state, in some kind of a dormant, non-empowered state for many thousands of years, being like, look, girl, I'm talking to the Shekinah while I'm driving home from Sedona. And I'm like, okay, like I can relate. I also came here as a civilizing presence, but like you cannot let these barbarians push you around. Like you can't come here as some kind of a fluffy bunny unprepared to fight the barbarians. Like this is also against Christ. Like Christs go on work all the time. Kind of, I want to joke about like missionary work, even though you guys have to know that all this supposed Mormon missionary work has nothing at all to do with actual, bringing people to God or something like that. Like it's all cover for intel agencies and assassinations and drug hijinks and things like that. So please recalibrate what is actually happening when you hear that someone is going on some kind of a mission. But in true Christhood, genuine Christs do go on missions to different planets to try to civilize them. Like that is a real thing. And if you're going to do that, you have to be prepared. You cannot go to a barbarian planet and like allow yourself to be captured by the barbarians or medically experimented upon or to have your emanations misappropriated or stolen. In fact, this is kind of like in the brochure, like, oh, so you're thinking of civilizing a planet. Don't let this, or this happen, because pitchforks and torches, they will do that type of bad stuff to ascended creatures. You can't expect to go there and have a type of hero's welcome where they're like, hi, we're barbarians. Please civilize us. You have to be prepared for them to be skeptical, full of hatred, try to stab you, try to rape you, try to do the worst that they can to you. And you have to be, like prepared to deal with that. So again, you can't just be a fluffy bunny. So as I'm driving back from Sedona, I'm having this stern talk with the Shekinah because I'm like, hey, it's very, very obvious that you very, very much effed up your mission. I'm glad that you came here and that you were trying to do this, but you cannot let yourself get captured. What in the world happened to you? And so, I actually did not get a very good ability to connect because 100% of the things that surround the Shekinah are you would call them satanic thought children. Satanism did not exist in our world until the Shekinah was taken prisoner. Up until that point, you had barbarians, you had things that were infested and mutated, but who were non-empowered. But you did not have a concerted effort to make blood sacrifices to demonic or malevolent presences as a quid pro quo. That is not how things got done. And then when this Shekinah was taken prisoner, then that is the beginning of the religion where that is how stuff gets done. And you also have concurrently, so you have spiritual quid pro quo. I'm sorry, my lips are so chapped, I can't even speak. You have spiritual quid pro quo, where someone says, oh, you want something done? Like I'm the God of Satan of the Bible. And I'm chomping my cigar. I'm like, hey, kid, I'll do something for you. But you know what? I'm going to need something from you. You're going to have to do something for me. You're going to have to get that ram, get him tied up, put him on a nice altar. Going to have to disembowel him. I'll need some entrails. And then I will think about hearing your request. Okay, your request has been duly noted, and you're gonna have to burn that ram too. I'm gonna want the pleasant aroma of the burning ram, please. Like, I'm trying to make the most ridiculous type of mafioso instead of an actual god, but that type of quid pro quo. I want something done, so I will kill an animal for the Lord to be able to get what I want. That's similar to what happened in ancient Sumeria. So we're going to talk about my drive home in 2025, but now we actually have to go in our time machine from super ancient Egypt in the time when women ruled to forward roughly 5,000 years ago. So now stick on the brakes and we are in ancient Sumeria. And this is also a time when humans were genetically modified again and exploited by different sky races. So you had at times, like think like you're an adopted child or you're in fosterage. Like at times you had someone who really cares for you and is like trying to give you a better life and an education. Then at times you went into a different house and there they barely fed you. And you slept under the stairs in a cabinet filled with spiders. And then you went to a different house. And then, then different people did different things and they tried to teach you something else. Like that is humanity. Humanity got treated in that way, at times benevolently overseen with genuine caregivers, and then at other times horribly genetically modified, exploited, mutilated, and like sexually violated in the way that these otherworldly creatures were not taking care of you, but more like holding you prisoner. And it definitely, has gotten worse as you have gotten closer to modern history. So Sumeria, according to your linear time, is when humans and civilization went from being mostly hunter-gatherers to being agrarians. And the Sumerians worshipped gods who supposedly came from an otherworldly place and civilized them by teaching them how to grow grain. Please know that growing of grain and sensible human agriculture and animal husbandry existed in the time of ancient Egypt when women ruled the place. And we definitely knew how to have beautiful gardens, how to grow more than enough food for our whole entire world, within the civilization, and how to use animals effectively. And we had wonderful, beautiful, life-giving food. And it was, I can't even describe it all. It was all done in the correct way that benefits your body and again gives rise to the predictability and the stability that you need to be able to genuinely have like art, music, culture, a sense of self, a sense of divine connection. It's very, very hard to do that when you're like barely getting by from year to year. Okay. So what as 5,000 years ago, ancient Sumeria was already a very bad time. People did not have their stuff together and they barely got by from year to year. And then you have another exploitive group of foster parents that came in and said, oh, you're such a poor orphan. We'll teach you how to grow barley. And we'll also genetically modify you again. And we're also going to do something else. We're going to teach you how to have something called money. And that was what they did. So now you have to the origin of money, which also it comes at the same time as the stealing this, the hijacking and imprisonment of the Shekinah and moving away from collaborative, sensible uses of resources, like using things in a way that benefits everyone. Because when I say collective and you think communism, like you just can't even comprehend this, but like there was a way to run things that benefited everyone. So that way you didn't have, like angry, homeless people who slept in the streets and had nothing. Okay, money. So back in ancient Sumeria, people were hunter-gatherers, and then this civilizing force came along and said, don't be hunter-gatherers, grow grain, and also work for your money. And they're like, what is money? I don't know what money is. I'm just an ancient Sumerian, and I just fish at the river, and I sit around and I do what I want. And they had to learn what money is. So when they had extra bundles of barley, they would make a little terracotta clay cone. And that would represent like a cone of barley in the field that was, harvested. And if you had a bunch of those, they would put them together in a little purse. You would have 4 or 5 cones of barley. People were illiterate and barely able to count. Like they were able to use the digits on their hand to be able to, do basic bartering and commerce. So there was not a way in that time, even when people were becoming agrarian, to store your grain for very long. If you store it for too long, it's going to get rotten. So there was not really even a motivation to become a manic, insecure hoarder, having to store up 25,000, grains of rice to be able to be safe for the winter. Like that's not practical, and that doesn't work with just basic amounts of grain. But it starts to work when you switch out the cones of terracotta for gold. Once you start to do that and you have the indestructible, untarnishable gold that lasts for forever, then you go, wait a minute, I work really, really hard for a year to grow all this barley. And then instead of just having barley that's going to rot, and instead of just having some stupid terracotta cones that will, break or get wet and wash away, and have eternal gold. And then I have something for a long time. And then they also learned how to have savings that lasts, upper class that lords over the lower class, people who will work for the people that have the gold. And then you have the origin of the barbaric value system, which is he who has the gold makes the rules, right? And then you have the outgrowth of the next 5,700 years of the world that you are very, very familiar with. And then you're like, oh, this is normal. And I come here and I'm like, no, none of this is normal. And none of this is the way that you're actually supposed to structure a reality or supposed to structure a society. And this is not the way that humans have always done it. So that's one of the major lies. And this is relevant to you because you're moving into ascension. It doesn't necessarily mean that you are moving straight into ephemera. You might move into an interim level wherein you still have biological bodies and reproduction. You're going to have to figure out what is an optimum way to create a civilization similar to using the best of what you have from that ancient matriarchy, but also applying what you have in your present world. So you're going to have to totally change, like who has the money, who is paying other people to work for them, and whom you should prioritize as having resources in the next chapter of humanity. And I'm really encouraging you to prioritize women and to prioritize women who are having babies. Because right now, what you have in 2025 is such a dysfunctional economy that young people cannot afford to buy a home. And it's not just in the United States, although that's where I am most familiar. It's also in many other places of the world because the real estate is very hijacked and it has not grown and accelerated at the same pace as earnings. So most young people are not earning enough to be able to afford their own home. And when you contrast that with people who were in their productive, fertile years, like in the 1940s or 1950s. Back then, society was set up differently so that young people could afford a home. Let me just hydrate. And you need to have a home to have a baby. Now, although there are a lot of people that live in non-optimum circumstances, and of course they're raising a family in an apartment or in a multifamily dwelling, it's really not optimum. What is optimum is for you to have your own freestanding dwelling as a family and your own land, a small amount of buffer around your own home. And that's important for grounding, for your feet to touch the ground, like to be able to go outside, for gardening, the capacity to actually have a relationship with your food, and for being able to do family activities, and that would be considered like playing outside. And those things in your world have become considered luxury items or only for the elite. And I would consider that to be foundation, baseline, normal of what you need to be a human and to have children in a correct environment. Why do I say this? Because you need to be able to calibrate to what is your psychic space? What is your bubble around you? What does it feel like to be yourself? And then what does it feel like when you are either next to or interactive with other people's bubbles? When you live in a multifamily dwelling or in an apartment building, your energy bubble is always overlapping with other people's energy. And it's very, very difficult to know who you are. When you're a child, you have to calibrate who you are, not how you feel absorbing the energy through the wall of some guy who's angry, who lives next door. Like, you can't grow up that way. So I'm an adult. I know who I am. And if my neighbor is angry next door, I'm like, that's not really what I feel like. I'm soaking up someone else's stuff. And then I'm either like, I want to move away or like do something because it's not my job to soak up that guy's stuff. Having a family, and you guys know I've not had a family here. Like, I've not had a baby here. Like, I am an ally, but have not had these experiences here. But what you need in order to have a good family is to be able to be like, this is our family space. This is us working out our stuff. So like, if your kid doesn't sleep through the night and you guys are sleep deprived, that's your stuff. But your stuff should not blob out onto everyone else in the community. You got it? Like, everybody needs the sanctity of their own space. And mostly through economic concerns, people don't have that. And then also mostly through economic concerns, people they're choosing not to procreate, because you have low fertility now because of these crazy science experiments that have fictionally invaded people's bodies, and they're effluvia in the world. But then you also have people who choose not to procreate because they are really expecting the worst. So the slang is to call them black-pilled or doomers, people who expect the worst. And they're like, not only are they not dating or looking to build a relationship with others, but they're also not thinking about having a family because they think it's going to be like the movie The Terminator. Like, you got Terminators killing your babies or whatever, like drones are going to laser zap your kid from the sky. Like, these are real, real problems that people feel. So young people feel very hopeless. And like, it's not possible or positive for them to find someone they love and create the next generation. It's a very, very bleak time. So it's not just biological impediments, it's also the emotional hopelessness that many people feel that is making them not strive and not reach forward and not try to build something. They also think that home ownership is like so elite at this point. Like, you can't buy a home, you need so much money, taxes are so high. How can it ever happen? Like, young people often feel very defeated, or like, they would have to win the lottery to be able to do this. And none of that helps to be able to build families and create positive infrastructure. Of course, people are still having babies irresponsibly. Like, people get pregnant by accident and have bad dysfunctional families. That still happens, but that's not optimum. Like, you still have the worst people breeding and making the worst dysfunctional families, but then you have the people who are sensible, who know how to use birth control, choosing not to have families because they're like, no, world is too screwed up and it's too expensive and it's too impractical to be able to do this. And so you are selecting for the least good qualities. Sorry, my brain isn't coming up with the right words. You are selecting for the opposite qualities for the next generation. You are selecting the least responsible people, who are the least responsible about their reproduction and the least responsible about their use of resources. And they are often burdensome to the rest of you who are choosing not to procreate because they require food subsidies and housing subsidies. All right. So none of this is working in the correct way. There are a lot of wrong people here who shouldn't actually be in existence because they were not consciously brought forward and created in the world. They are like not good candidates for the cosmic band. And there's also a huge proliferation of them. So from women not being in control of the people that they reproduce with, their partners, creating more and more and more degraded future generations, where now you're at a point where you have taken away a lot of the very, very good traits or suppressed a lot of the very, very good traits of humanity and artificially amplified a lot of the pathogenic traits and also artificially amplified a lot of the pathogenic people. And that's why you had like 89% pathogenic evil, like polarity evil people in the world, and only 11% like wild bees who don't require a lot of medical interventions, are innately generous, are like the natives of this world. And don't worry, you can be Caucasian or whatever, you don't necessarily have to look like a Native American or a Native Australian Aboriginal person to be a wild bee and to be here. Like I'm talking about your soul presence and not necessarily just what your body is shaped like or where your most recent ancestry was. So please know that it is more about who you are in this moment, whether you have a connection to nature, whether you prefer to be unnatural, whether you prefer to be natural as opposed to technological, and whether you prefer the organic timelines. So, when I go on my retreats, I always like to make the lighting natural lighting. Like we're always trying to be outside in the sunlight or building a campfire. We're always trying to use the most natural food possible. And actually, we were really happy at the retreat center because they had wonderful mineral springs. So there, all of our water, we didn't have to import and bring it in. All of the sink water, all of the bath water, everything is all mineral water. Like it's such a beautiful luxury. Like this is how we should live. Let's contrast that with my least favorite person in the world, Elon Musk. And he's going to fly to Mars and you're going to live in a totally artificial society. Like you will not be having a bath in sparkling mineral water in his world. It's like, no, like you'll be a microchip person and you'll drink flat distilled water and have no divine connection. Like that's the end result. You're at the end result of the insanity that began rather many, many, many millennia ago. So wait, Chiki's right here. She's doing great. She does not need any bribes. She's also super chubby because we were in the car for many hours and I just kept on like doling them out. Just kept on doling out the bribes. So she ate like a whole bag. She's very large now. All right. So that's do you want to see Chiki? Chiki's doing great. Chiki's right here. All right, Chiki, everybody wants to see you because you're so amazing. Here's Chiki. Hi. Looking great. All right, super. Back to work over here. So there's the non sequitur of how this divine presence that I call Shekinah ever got taken out of that pyramid. The story of Exodus is the story of the power center being placed into the tabernacle that is known as the Ark of the Covenant and traipsed around in the Sinai desert for 40 years. And during that time is when Moses gets the tablets that are known as the Ten Commandments, when the soon-to-be Israelite people are even given some amount of basic life lessons and rules as to how to behave. Like they were very, very barbaric. And when they were wandering around, they didn't know like what is the right way to act and what is not the right way to act. Oh, hold on one moment. Actually, I'm going to let my dog go outside. Hold on one moment. Oh, just for that little break. Thank you so much. Well, I took care of Cheeky. And I know that I lost my place in my long ongoing rant, what I was talking about. Okay, so wandering in Sinai, carrying this power source for many decades, and then eventually being given the go-ahead by the satanic voice in the sky that says, now you go to this place, which is going to be known as Jerusalem, and you're going to build the official temple there. So what you need to know is barbarians who came from the outskirts of civilized ancient Egypt, where they did not do sacrifices, this sky voice and the presence of the Shekinah told them, build a portable animal sacrifice place. And that's what the original tabernacle was. So the Ark of the Covenant was in the Holy of Holies, only the high priests went in there. And there was a whole procedure for them to do that. And then they did the animal sacrifices in the presence of the Shekinah. Eventually, the Shekinah was brought to, Jerusalem. They built the physical edifice, like the stone edifice where they did all the animal sacrifices. And there's a cavern underneath there that is known as the Dome of the Rock. Like now it's a mosque in your current world. The temple was destroyed several times, but that was where there's caverns underneath, and this is known as Solomon's Temple. And if you know about the story of King Solomon, it also talks about how he had a magic ring, kind of like the Green Lantern, and he used it to control demonic presences to get them to build the actual edifice of the temple for him too. So there's deep stuff there. I hope that you can also tell that the practice of animal sacrifice is inherently demonic. Although it was so normalized into your world by the time that I got here, both circumcision is very demonic, and then also the animal sacrifice is demonic. These are blood sacrifices to an unhealthy, unhealed presence that is an imposter, not a real God, and God would never ask you to injure yourself or an innocent animal as a form of worship. That's very, very big stuff. The prescription for self-violence or violence towards your offspring is particularly distressing. And it was so entrenched in normalized human society and human behavior that it's only now starting to be a radical discussion to talk to parents. Are you considering not mutilating your firstborn? Have you considered not mutilating your children going forward? It's a delicate conversation, but it must happen because this is very, very harmful activity. In fact, you should really think of it through the lens of modern psychology. Really, anyone who is a cult leader, a spiritual advisor, or anyone who advises you to harm yourself or your offspring is not giving you good advice. And you really should be skeptical. All of your red flags should come up and be like, maybe that's not like a respectful way to treat other people, much less worship God. And we shouldn't do that. But for a long time, it was not only acceptable, it was required as part of the power structure. And why is that? So now we're getting into the origins of Satanism. It's not just that there was an original genetically modified fetus implanted in Sarah. It's not just that the Egyptian outcasts were, again, genetically modified by the satanic space races to hear evil as if it is God. It's also more than that. It's the Shekinah as an imprisoned or hijacked presence that validated the prayers of evil. And this is why I have some very real critique of that, divine civilizing presence, because you can't come to a barbarian world as a civilizer and then be taken hostage and held in a, like a portable jail, and then have your energy grant the prayers or requests of a bunch of evil people. That is wrong. And she has over 5,000 years of mistakes to speak for. Because if she was able to fight back in that moment, like they're going into the Great Pyramid, they're gonna get her, Moses is there, it's Charlton Heston, and he is gonna get that light being out of the pyramid and stick her in the silly old tabernacle and kidnap her into the desert. And that's also the Red Sea, the parting of the Red Sea and all that stuff, the big scene from the movie. What if she just melted his face at that point and was like, no, I don't think I want to go. Melt your face instead. That would have been a much better choice because you wouldn't have had 5,700 years of satanic activity on the planet. Think of all of the sacrifices, all of the death of the, so the Israelites went on to become an empire. They cut off the tips of their penises, and they really did end up becoming fruitful as multiplied in the stars, whatever the Bible passage, however it says that. So it worked. They became the chosen people, and they grew up to spread themselves across the planet and even to heavily influence, many aspects of media and human culture and even your current earthly politics. And apologies while I collect myself as I'm speaking about these things. All of that is like a negative timeline. All of that is a misadventure. All of that is bulk and filler of events that should really never have happened. That if you go back to this, she should have incinerated, fought back. So even if she came prepared just to melt people with her plasma being presence, they should have been melted. And there are stories from the Bible of how the Israelites occasionally would open up the Ark of the Covenant into their enemies, melt their enemies' faces, be like, hey, check this out, melty, melt, melt, and then close it back up again. But they themselves should have melted because they were unrighteous. They should not have been able to be even in the presence of this. So that's one of my main critiques. How did that even happen? And what level of responsibility does the divine feminine presence face for the hijacking of her gifts? And this relates in every way to the modern world where women's reproductive gifts have been hijacked or misused. And then women are often destroying their own offspring in regret, like they're sexually exploited, have pregnancies with males they don't want to reproduce, are making lives and children that they don't actually want to raise or have in their family, and then they destroy those pregnancies. And I can't even say like is better or worse, because it's bad to make wrong pregnancies, and then it's bad to have to make wrong people out of wrong pregnancies. And this is pretty much the world that you're in. Again, 89% of the people who were here, up to a couple of years ago, read my comic book, they were not good genetic combinations that came from like randomness of women not being in control of their reproduction. And so you have a lot of filler, a lot of people who are not correct versions of their self. They are far to the periphery in their own time vortex. And because there's such a predomination here, so there's majority of people who are screwed up, distorted versions of self as opposed to focused and essential versions of self, that humans have even calibrated to that being normal, and for you to consider that that is like the normal way that society is structured. And it's not the way that society is structured. We're supposed to have a society that is 89 or 90% genuine, divinely connected people that have a soul, know who they are, and know what they're here to do, and are here to guide and shape society, and who aren't here as like passengers or damsels or passive victims in any way. And instead, you have the opposite. You have the formerly, of course, the masses, the majority, the generalized screwed up people, suppressing the people who are intelligent, adept, again, divinely connected, and who do know what is going on and who should be here in the leadership position. And then also most of your, at this point, music, art, culture, and leadership and government education have been completely taken up by the people who are evil, the people who are non-people, who are the end result of the many multiple generations of pregnancies where women were not in control of themselves and they bred for the worst characteristics. I will repeat that again. Due to many millennia during which women who should be the gatekeepers of their wombs have not been fully in control of their reproductive activities, the human genetics and soul genetics, or quality of souls that are available here in this world, have been diluted to the point of 90% or 89% diluted souls that are a catastrophe and not really the person they're supposed to be. And really only 10 or 11% of the people that are here are, the essence of their true form and are who they're really supposed to be. And that, of course, makes it very difficult for you to participate in mass culture, because the things that are on the radio are bad music made by non-people for other people who are thoroughly forgettable. In this world that you are in, I just recently drove past Los Angeles. It's such a pit of misery. I can't even go through that town, but I had to drive in that direction to get to Sedona. And when I was there, I got a real intuitive read on the space. I would call it a large grouping of thoroughly forgettable people attempting to somehow make themselves memorable through media. And then you understand the motivation for people who are not extraordinary and who are very mediocre as a soul to want to be in a TV commercial, or maybe on a TV show, or even one day in a movie. And then everyone will know about them and they'll be famous. And then they'll have a type of eternal something or whatever. I'm thinking of like Pee-wee's Big Adventure or whatever. He's like, in a movie, like I'm going to be famous. Like the painfully cringeworthy, obvious, ordinary person that is not extraordinary in any way, but wishing that they will be able to be in a movie and somehow achieve immortality. Do you understand this is an origin of the lame ass wankers who were on the outskirts of Egyptian civilization who were not going to achieve rock stardom at the laser light shows with genuine divine presences and who were not going to achieve immortality through their greatness, their psychic gifts, their artistry at all. They were busy pushing a wheelbarrow and not knowing anything or having any great insights, whatever. Flash forward many, many millennia, those characteristics and those people are still here and they all live in LA. And just like that Carpenter song, and they're all driving cars and pumping gas. They're all working these lower jobs, like parking cars, pumping gas, being waitresses, but they're gonna be famous one day. So this is, again, like I didn't articulate it very well, but a whole entire industry and a whole entire town that is created for and that magnetizes in people who aren't extraordinary and who are desperately, cringe-worthily trying to be extraordinary or be recognized in some way, and that the media does that. And the politicians are bad. They are motivated in exactly the same way, although they are the less attractive cousins of the people who go to Hollywood. So you have Washington, D.C. as the less attractive, less physically beautiful version of the same thing. People who are not innately extraordinary, but who are desperately hoping for some media attention to be able to buoy their sense of self and, you know, help them to think that they're somehow relevant or special or unique in any way. And they're not unique in any way. But contrast that with someone who is a great musician, a visionary artist, a natural leader, a person who writes poetry, someone who's like doesn't need a lot of technology or a lot of anything, and they're just amazing. They're in your world, they're in your life. You have these people as your friends. Those are the people who should be famous. Those are the people who should, whatever, be on a screen or on a stage or in front of a microphone or in leadership. And you're in this inverted world where you're like, well, no, those are the guys that are working at 7-Eleven, right? The really good rock stars are working at 7-Eleven, and the lame ass losers like Taylor Swift, she's on a stage. This is not the way it's supposed to be. All right. So you definitely know you're in an inverted, satanic distortion world. Let me hydrate. Okay, wait, hydrate more. Thank you. And apologies for drinking coffee during class. Okay, so Mary Ellen says, if she was that powerful, how come she was able to get captured and stay captured? Bazinga. I completely agree. And I can speak from my own experience here. You know, they definitely, evil ones tried to hijack me in 2021, tried to take away my powers, tried to douse me with my version of kryptonite to, you know, make it so that it was difficult for me to fight back. And I self-augmented, rose up, and now, you know, kick ass 20 times harder than ever before. Why didn't she do something similar? It's a very, very fair question to ask. And so the origin is from the pyramid, taken on an odyssey through Egypt, at one point underneath the temple in Jerusalem, then the story goes, sequestered away to a very deep well in North Africa, which is currently Ethiopia, where it is presently looked over and watched over by a sect of monks who all eventually, they had their whole life looking over this well and making sure no one goes there. They all eventually go blind. And you can do a little bit of research. You can find out about this. I'm not just making things up. So it was my perception that this light presence is at this bottom of this deep well. And then they poured some kind of stuff in afterwards, like some kind of liquid melted uranium or ore, something like that, that is radioactive. And that's been kind of like a cap on top of this, making it difficult for her to be able to get out. That's one of the things that was in there that was holding her back. So as I was driving back from Sedona, I'm like, okay, I'm on a mission. I'm going to resolve this thing with the Shekinah, because basically all of the animal sacrifices would just have been dead animals if she hadn't been there somehow sanctifying the activities in the newly created religion, which is known as Judaism. That the hijacking of her validation and saying that things should be done in that way is part of why our world is so very, very screwed up right now. And I think that it's not a fair posture for her to claim victimhood or to claim to be a damsel. Even though, she might be a light creature with some vulnerabilities, at a certain point, you have to figure out how to fight back. So I interacted with her over the past week in order to come forward and to say, hi, like, all right, I know you screwed up your mission. You did some good stuff, but then got captured, and then they did 5,000 years of torture in your name. And now I think you should fix things. Instead of me coming forward and being like, hi, like, I'm here to rescue you. Let me pick you up like a damsel and like, I'll fix all your messes for you. I was more like, hi, like, I can see that you're very screwed up and things are not okay. I'm going to remove that radiation. So I removed the radiation that was kind of like, encapsulating that well area. And I'm like, okay, like it should, because now it should be no problem for you to, again, pardon me here, talk with your home base. Like, you didn't come here alone. Like you connected to home base, right? Talk with your people, tell them what's going on. Also, I said to her, the what's going on the surface of the planet is very screwed up, and you need to fix it. She's like, I can't come out. Like it's too, the frequencies are too bad there. I'm like, I know. Who's responsible? Why do you think these frequencies are so bad? Like basically because you didn't do your job, and that's why the humans devolved into creating electricity, creating satellites, creating a bunch of crazy screwed up hardware that's not supposed to be here, that's making all of our lives very bad. So she's like, I'm a frequency being. I can't come out there. The frequencies are terrible. I'm like, I know, you need to fix it. And so that was part of the things. But then recognize that posturing of like, oh, like the frequencies are so bad out there, that also comes through the filter of all of the evil satanic children that cluster around her, because they are all her mind creations. And that's important to recognize. When your mind is hijacked or your energy is hijacked, it's kind of like you have money that you want to spend differently, but someone else spent it on these terrible things. And then you have to claw back. What you do in those situations is not be like, oh, like I'm disempowered, poor me. Wah, someone else do it for me. You're supposed to be like, wow, this is all my money. I'm in charge of this, these expenditures. None of this is correct. So what you have to do is say, I revoke consent. None of this was done with my consent. So I revoke consent, real, imagined, tortured, or coerced. I claw back my energy. I take these things back. Like if you are a magical wish granting genie, and something else has taken your ability to grant wishes and is making the very, very worst things happen. And then all of a sudden you come to your senses and you're like, what? I'm a magical genie. Stop stealing my magic and making bad things happen. What would you do? As a magical genie, you would claw back all of your energy and all of your magic that had been used to make bad stuff happen. Well, guess what? 5,000 years of hijacked Shekinah magic is how you had the present level of economy in the world. And of course, you guys have been following world events that have been happening over the past couple of weeks. Like as I was in Sedona doing my dance with my wonderful group of noble, whatever, super badass dancers. There's gyrations in the silver market and things that were probably maybe even never expected to happen. And a lot of people were buying silver and they're like, like maybe when you're old and gray, this would be relevant. It's very relevant. The reevaluation of silver being used to severely, I want to say disenchant and to inconvenience the central banks. And so the central banks and the governments are empowered by the imprisoned Shekinah. And so this is a big thing that needs to be resolved. So how did I leave it? Because my journey across the desert was like only a day. That's a lot to try to resolve like the entire history of Satanism in one day. But I really left it, as I always do, in freedom. So I say to this presence, I'm like, look, here's a bucket and a mop because you have a big something to clean up here. I'm giving you this opportunity. You can either, like kind of live in regret, like, wow, like you really should have fought back 5,000 years ago. You should not have allowed yourself to be hijacked. You should have done something better sooner than this, but you didn't. And I'm here now. And she was also trying to be like, well, you should have protected me better, like many millennia ago, now that this happened. And I'm like, well, hey, I'm here now because now I'm a physical presence, not merely a otherworldly presence, and I'm here to help you now. And would you like to actually fight back, or would you like to die in regret. Like, think of it like this, like you're a positive, fluffy bunny. You come to civilize the barbarians. The barbarians treat you badly and imprison you for 5,000 years and then do the very, very worst in your name, right? And then you have this beautiful, like angelic Tinkerbell-like creature that's all bedraggled and feeling terrible and feeling very, I think, responsible and guilty about not doing a good job and then having all that energy misappropriated and used badly. So what I say is, you can fix this instead of like, devolving and just going limp and like, oh, well, like, and then that's the end. The end of her story can be got imprisoned and treated very badly and then died in imprisonment, or that somebody took away the radiation. You were able to get out of this level of imprisonment and you emerged and you kicked ass, took your energy back, took your power back, and purged this world of all evil and corruption. That's a much better narrative. So I give this presence that opportunity, but also I don't require it because I also recognize that not everybody is that kick-ass. Some people might have been in imprisonment for 5,000 years and then be like, wah, wah, like, I can't do it. I can't do it. And, I can't, and it's not my fault and all sorts of excuses and things like that. I have to be prepared for that. And so what I did during my whole entire drive is like, look, I'm going to keep on doing what I do, which of course, fictionally is destroy evil that's in the world, and send it to entropy. But what I said to her is, stop making more evil, because the satanics, through their out of control negative breeding, make more evil. And sometimes it's through, conception through rape, but sometimes it's conception through coerced marriage. Sometimes it's conception through people that don't love each other, but one is rich. And so they're marrying for wealth. Sometimes it's IVF, eggs that don't belong with different things. Sometimes it's CRISPR, that's definitely satanic. And then these other breeding experiments and things that are now wholly unnatural, like cloning stuff, all of that is satanic stuff. These lives should never be created. And it's the Shekinah's fault that these things are being created. And that sounds harsh, but you got to take control of your energy when you come into this world to create those types of things. So what I'm talking about is a empowerment of the divine feminine. Women in this world have to reclaim the power that is associated with their reproduction so that they are no longer having devil babies. Let's call them non-desirable souls coming into the world. And what you're supposed to do when you're a woman is, of course, profoundly love your partner, be in a consensual, conscious relationship with someone that you want to be with, that you love. And then you have to call in the soul that you want to come into your body. I have never done this. I have not been pregnant or done this with my body, but this is like ancient folklore of what women are supposed to do in a non-technologically, infested society. You're supposed to be totally psychic and supposed to talk to the soul of your baby who's going to come into your body and make sure that it's a good match and that they're celebrated coming into your family and that you even kind of know them before you gestate them, before you meet them. That's what you're supposed to do. And that's, I know, like a tall order, but in the world that you presently have, like you sometimes have very, very good people who have, souls that come into their family and they're like, definitely, you would consider like sociopaths, like kids that are not good kids, but then also sometimes into some of these profoundly evil, dark bloodline families, good souls incarnate. And sometimes that's not because they're lost on their path, but they're like, that's an effed up bloodline. I'm going to go in there and fix things up. And that is much more of what the original occupant of this body that I'm in was like. She was definitely born into a screwed up bloodline family as a systems disruptor to try to fix things. And like they sacrificed her, which is terrible, which is why I'm like facetiously funny about this. But no, it's terrible. And, she just would have been eradicated. But I came in as the uncontrolled variable in that experiment in order to really bust the entire system of Satanism in this world. So I am busy entropizing these different organisms and organizations that are satanic, that shouldn't even be in your world. They are matter and energy out of place. But how can they be in the world? They can be in the world through the disruption and hijacking of the generative process. The world that we were in before this, babies happened because of love, and they were raised in love. And the world that happens after this divine civilizing presence being put into is like the validator of the barbaric, first Jewish, Judeo-Jewish version of reality, structuring, and spirituality, and then the Christian. Judeo-Christianity is really, and also Islam, the from the servant, Ham. None of these are good religions. These are all terrible religions, and they are all death cults that genuinely worship an imposter god who is actually Satan, not the true divine presence. And that humanity has been so genetically modified that they hear the imposter god as if it is the real god. And that's one of the more distressing things, because it should be a red flag when your supposed God is like, cut off your penis and kill animals. Like, yes, God, I will do exactly what you say. Like, your inner red flag should come up and you should be like, I don't think we're really supposed to do that type of stuff around here. And it doesn't sound very divine. Are you sure that's what I'm supposed to do, God? Like, some people are so far away from their own calibration of what God would actually sound like that that sounds like truthful to them. It's like, yes, God told me to cut off pieces of my genitals and then also kill innocent animals. And this is what we do. So, and also, if you would like to know, how does this relate to the present level of Judaism and worship? So the temple was destroyed, the first temple was destroyed, and that was after the life of the man that you know as Jesus. But then it was, the Jewish people went into Babylonian exile. They originally came back to the same place in Jerusalem, and they rebuilt the temple. And then that temple was destroyed. And so now the worship that Jewish people do is not through direct animal sacrifice. It is through indirect animal sacrifice by the parchment upon which the Torah is written, must be an animal skin, and it is paraded in the synagogue as a living creature. And it is kissed and it is elevated. You must never let it touch the ground. But also, when you do the Friday night Sabbath, what is Sabbath? Sabbath is not a day of rest. It is presented falsely and artificially as your day of rest. That is like how they talk to medieval peasants in the Dark Ages. They're like, this is the day when you don't have to till the fields and you get to eat a chicken, which is also animal sacrifice, although I eat animals plenty, but you get to not have to work, right? But no, what the Sabbath actually means is a remembering of the temple. And what you do is you have the two candles, because you remember the first temple and the second temple. And you know what candles are usually made out of, but in your world, they're petroleum, but they used to be made out of animal fat, beef tallow. So you burn two animal fat candles because you don't have the temple where you used to burn the actual animals. And these are vestigial ancestral traces and remembrances of what you did with animals. And then there's also some particular holidays, the holiday that's known as Passover, where you have to have, basically sacrificed a lamb in order to have the shank bone for one of the particular rituals. And there's another one that's a New Year's holiday where you blow the ram's horn, which is the shofar, and you have to have a horn from an animal to do these things. So there's lots of rituals that still involve the utensils of animal sacrifice, even though most modern Jews are not. They are mostly performing ritual sacrifice. Mostly they are performing prayers and other forms of obeisance as a modern form of connecting to God. But please note, the sacrifices remain in a crypto or hidden sense. So there's still one ritual that is performed by Jewish people in Brooklyn where you take a chicken and you swing it around your head to take on your sins, and then you literally kill it or throw it in a river. There are things that are like that, but also the central banks, the world monetary system, the International Monetary Fund, and the way that world wars and crusades were generated are pretty much the sacrifice. So you moved from centralized sacrifices in a particular brick and mortar location in Jerusalem to sacrifices that are done throughout the whole entire world that involve armed conflicts that are known as crusades and world wars. But you also have today sacrifices that are done technologically, that are done through various forms of pollution. Some of these are subcutaneous pollutions that are done to your most young and vulnerable members of society, even in their first few years when they are nonverbal. And these are literal sacrifices when they distort a person's original soul presence, turn them into inarticulate, like inflamed, I don't want to say monsters, but they are like grotesqueries of what they should be, because they're so neurologically damaged and inflamed that then their behavior, viewpoint, and what they're doing in the world becomes like dangerous or burdensome to the people around them, as opposed to life affirming, and they become no longer contributors. The original version of themselves is sacrificed due to the medical interventions that are required and foisted upon them. So you have a lot of this diminishment of an organism, or diminishment of a consciousness, which is what sacrifice is. And what a bizarre non-starter to consider that God wants to be worshipped by the diminishment of its various organisms. Like, God makes a perfect organism, and you're like, I would like to diminish this organism for you, God. That's how I say thank you. Like, thank you for creating this whatever, ox or ram or this child. I would like to diminish their functionality in the world in order to show you that I'm grateful. Like, none of these things are sensible at all. And also the sense of going to wars for God, that you have never been supposed to be doing this, and it never makes sense. But there have been many, many wars that were fought, not just for any old God, but for the supremacy of the God of the Torah or the God of the New Testament. And really, both of these are the same God, because they wanted to portray it as if Christianity is the new and improved version that did not require sacrifice anymore. That's the idea of the story of Jesus. Like, he's like, all right, guys, you're sacrificing too many animals. I'm angry. I'm going to turn over your tables. Stop commodifying all of this. This is wrong. I know what I'll do. I'll sacrifice myself. And then you guys are all going to stop sacrificing stuff, right? And that's supposedly what happened, even though that's not truthful. But then from that sacrifice, it did not end human sacrifice. It just continued for many thousands of years after that. So that was a total rug pull, and not the way it was supposed to be at all. But please don't believe in the official story that he offered himself as the final sacrifice. This is all nonsense, psyops, and untruthfulness. There is a very real pathway to achieving your optimum timeline now that has to do with resolving whatever happened with this original Shekinah presence. And it also relates to a recalibration and a restoration of what it is to be a woman in the world. You know, if you had women fully in control of their reproductive powers, you wouldn't have any of these evil efforts, like, you know, bad people making the next generation. Their families and their bloodlines would die off in one generation, because they would never make babies. They would never have the next generation of evil. And like, if I think about, remember Princess Diana, Lady Diana, and King Charles. So King Charles is an evil reptilian, and he's from this gross family bloodline, and they're all very unattractive and, not very nice, good people. But what they do is they invite or entice someone who is good and beautiful, usually blonde, right? With a beautiful face and a beautiful body, a princess. What is a princess? And entices them to marry into the gross, evil bloodlines, thinking that she'll be wealthy and thinking that she'll be empowered, but really becoming a bird in a gilded cage. Like, this is what happens. The evil bloodlines degrade, and they have to entice light to come back into those bloodlines and to reinvigorate them and revivify them. And if those participants that are light and beautiful are not enticed and rewoven into the bloodlines, those evil bloodlines do die out. They either die out through recessive genes, like the hemophilia and the other autoimmune and cancer genes that are concentrated in those families, or they die out from death, misadventure, death by misadventure, or through self-destruction, manias and unintelligence and idiocy. Like, they don't have staying power, and they're pretty much just a family line that's a house for demons, for all of the unresolved negative stuff that their ancestors embraced. And this goes back to the original Israelites, or the original outcasts in Egypt. Like, there's 5,000 years of trauma that must be resolved for that Satanism to go away. And it's also that Shekinah presence is responsible for that trauma. And it is also her trauma that her energy and, vitality was used in this bad way. But she must resolve that trauma, because otherwise she could just die in debt. Like, if she's kind of an eternal presence, so it's not that easy to die. But just like, if her life ended now, then it would just be like dying in a very unresolved way. And it's so much better for her to be able to say, like, these bad things happen, but that's not the end of the story. And then this is what happened next. But there's also, so it's not resolved. I haven't finished everything up. I did remove a lot of the radiation imprisonment so that way she should be able to talk to her home world and also be more present in the world. So there has to be a cleaning up of the misappropriation energy, a restoration of her, because also, like, if you're a genie, you should not be in prison. The first thing you should do is use your wish granting ability to grant your own wishes for freedom. And then where should she go and what should she do in freedom? Like, I would say she should clean up her messes and also not be in prison. But key point, Judeo-Christianity cannot steal and misappropriate her energy anymore. That cannot be the thing that sanctifies these violences as a sacrifice. Like, a dead thing is just a dead thing until it gets somehow sanctified as a sacrifice. And that sanctification process is a nerve plexus that is in the viewer or the person who is the killer, like the person who's giving the sacrifice. They have a nerve plexus, which is kind of like a way of structuring their brain that makes them think not just like I'm randomly killing a beautiful creature in the world, but they are diseased enough to think like they're like, I am doing something holy for God. And it's a lot of self-delusion and codified self-delusion, because then the other priests and acolytes and participants all get together and they're all like, good job doing that thing for God. And then it kind of encourages the nerve plexus. But if nobody had that nerve plexus, you'd be like, stop what you're doing immediately. Like, you're just destroying an animal and you're not even going to eat that animal. Like, you're just doing something wrong. And that is not how you worship. So you have to resolve the embedded nerve plexus from the people who presently have it and prevent them from teaching it to the next generation, prevent these behaviors, prevent these worldviews, and also prevent the hijacking of the energy of this, formerly imprisoned presence that has been used to justify and fuel some of the most dysfunctional things in the world right now. So it's very, very positive that I got to this in my planetary cleanup stuff, because as I've been going out to Sedona and preparing for what I did in terms of my dance, I've been clearing out a lot of the stuff that is transhumanist. A lot of the things that I've been cleaning house on are technology based, microchips, implants into people's brains, not real AI, but like pseudo intelligence and things that are there. And these are mostly modern things. Mostly what I've been fighting against have been the people and the systems that were created within the past 5 years or 5 to 10 years, like, the chemtrails and other things like that. But before that, there is something deeper that I have been here to respond to or to fight against. And of course, the original occupant of my body here was in the process of being satanically sacrificed. And it's very, very relevant to me, because when you do these types of things, it's kind of like when you have an investment, not a skin in the game, like you have something that you're risking, like in poker or something like that. Like, it matters to you. It matters to me. You just think they tried to destroy my body. It matters to me. I'm personally invested on this. And then, of course, there are many times when they attacked me throughout my existence here as Aurora, like in the physicality, where it's also like, oh, like, they tried to kill me, and then I will now kill you. Like, these are very, very fair things. So I came here into this world, and then they escalated, and now I very much have a justification to destroy their entire empire and wipe them all out. So it's worked out in a way that favors me, because it empowers me. But like, victims should always be given the opportunity to fight back, like whenever possible, or fight back in a supported way. Like, your community is like, okay, like, we know that this bad thing happened to you, and here's the person who did it. Like, you get to destroy them, or you get to disempower them, because there is a restoration of your energy. And these are like basic energy rules. Not necessarily civilized stuff, because when you say civilized, you think that you have to go to a magistrate who will sign a decree with a quill pen, and that's how you will get justice. But that's not energetic justice. Like, you get energetic justice when you claw back your energy and you get back, you are restored from things that were stolen from you. Okay, so wait, let me go to, there's a big question here. Someone just wrote this. Okay, so Suzuka first says, isn't this what Gaia did? Let the evil just take over. I think that that's very apt, Suzuka. There is complicity or personal responsibility of the planet herself, especially as a generative force. Like, the planet is the ultimate womb, or the ultimate divine feminine creative force in the gestation of life, in the creation of organisms, in the creation of ecosystems, and in the larger enhancement of life, like as life is here and life builds here. So that's definitely something that we should be critical of the planet herself. Planetary resources being plundered and used for technology that is not acceptable. And then the Shekinah, it's like spiritual resources, the capacity to make things happen with your mind. So there's earthly materialism plundered, gold and treasure plundered, but there's also spiritual divine connection, capacitation, prayer, that which is beyond the five senses that is being badly utilized. Sorry, Aurelia is showing memes of crying because it's so sad. I know it's a very, very sad story, so we got to fix things. And Suzuka says, okay, this is long, so I'm going to have to squint. Says, I had my son at home when I was 19. An appointment was made with the doctor to have him checked and get circumcised. She says they were in his office and he was getting ready to do it. All sorts of warnings were going off and you got it. Suzuka says, I was raised to believe that this is what we do for various reasons, including health reasons. To my horror, he was going to perform this with no local painkiller. This is how they do it, girl. And Suzuka said, aren't you going to numb him? He told me, no, that babies don't feel it. I thought to myself, like hell. I said to him, if he makes one sound, I want you to stop. When Jody made a small start of a cry, I said, stop, stop, stop. And he stopped. I thought to myself, I'm not doing this. He can do this when he's older if he wants, but I want no part of this. Even though I was brainwashed, I still had the ability to listen and stop when I knew it was wrong, even though there was no worldly evidence that it was wrong. Suzuka, I'm very glad that you did that and that your maternal instincts kicked in and that you were empowered enough in your relationship with your doctor to be able to say no and don't do this. So that was however many years ago that you had your son, right? Now I think the medical system is even worse and even more disempowering to women while they're giving birth. That you have to be so protective or have so many people there with you in the birthing chamber to make sure that you don't get injected with this and your baby doesn't get injected with this and then this doesn't happen and this doesn't happen. And like, I, again, have never given birth, but I have seen my friends and I know it's very exhausting as a process. And after all of that, they could be like, okay, look, like we would just like you to sign this waiver that's going to turn your baby into a hippopotamus. And then you'll have pelicans coming out of your nose. And you'd be like, I'll sign anything, like whatever. Like, your guard is down because you're endured so much. So when they come to the new parent and like, yeah, like your baby's fine, but we're just going to cut off the tip of his penis and then send you home with him. Like you just want to go home and you just sign and agree to whatever. So it's huge that you resist this. Mothers have to protect your sons. And, fathers have to protect the mothers. Like everybody's got to protect everybody in this world because it is very wrong, very satanic, very, harmful. Okay, so what's the problem with circumcision? Not only that it is a blood sacrifice to an evil imposter god, but it causes actual neurological changes in the tiny baby, the tiny male, that brings up levels of sexual violence that would be never experienced if not for this barbaric procedure. So the non-anesthetic causes profound trauma, totally breaks trust, associates sexual satisfaction with pain, and starts to bring up huge levels of misogyny and misandry. Sex as violence, sex as an expression of hatred, sex as an expression of the harmful trauma from the doctor to this little baby. And that's pretty much the Jewish religion and the Jewish culture. And a lot of the stuff in the original Bible is really not healthy, not socially positive stuff, because it is about the barbaric values of go destroy your enemy, take his land, and then have babies in my name, which is pretty much what this voice from the sky said. So there's a lot of stuff where modern believers say, that was 5,000 years ago, and they were simple goat herders, and that was appropriate for then. That was then, this is now, and we don't destroy our enemies now. But a lot of this bullshit from the United States of satanic America has to do with invading other countries, where they're like, oh, yes, we're America, we're going to do this, and we're going to kill these other people. There's a lot of this, the supposed moral high ground of being a Christian nation and enforcing certain values, which is completely wrong and erroneous, and the nation does not actually embrace those values at all, but some sense of being the ostensible policeman of the world, voice of righteousness, These wars were never about righteousness or never about correctness. These are all satanic nerve plexuses that are indoctrinated into cadets at West Point so that way they can do terrible harm to other people under the auspices of actually helping the United States. So the harm to the male children is not only in creating them as instruments of sexual violence that then go off into society, it is also by making them less feelings centered, less attentive to their feelings, and more easy to be exploited to become warriors for the United States government and go off into Iraq or Afghanistan or in previous generations, Vietnam or Korea or whatever next level of World War III they had planned, because again, the gold, the banks, and the wars are all related. And now, since I've shared this with you here today, you guys now know that the origin of all of that goes back to the Shekinah and her imprisonment. And this is the moment where everything should be resolved through her being set free or possibly sent back to where she came from or resolved somehow, because you can't just stand there as a type of battery being hijacked and misused for evil, and then you guys experiencing the end result of that, whatever, like a 3D printer that's printing evil all the time that you then have to deal with. So really, I am having to deal with it. And I got to the point, like I said, where I cleaned up the technology, because the evil satanic ones that have been genetically created into this world create crap technology. They create crap people, and then crap people create crappy technology. So I did a lot over the past several years of destroying the crappy technology and destroying those who make the crappy technology, like they're scientists and doctors. But now you're just down to the original flavor satanic stuff that has infested and worked its way through your world. And it's revolutionary. If I start to tell you, like, well, what would it be like if women owned all of the property, as opposed to men owning all of the property? And what if you didn't have to be someone's daughter or someone's wife to have a house to live in? Because according to the biblical ideals, that is the truth of male supremacy. You either live under your father's house roof or you live under your husband's roof. And according to the traditional values of this very flawed, Judeo-Christian world, then the male, you defer to the males, and they run the world. They're the leaders, and they give you tiny amounts of money that you can do tiny things with. And they have all the money, and they make all the bigger decisions. And that is totally wrong and erroneous and not the way that it's supposed to be. So it should be that you, as a woman, like, own your own house, and you don't have to live with a man or acquiesce to his desires in any way just so that you can have a place to live. And that's a non-starter. And then the idea of, that you have to have a job, like, that is also a non-starter. You're simply supposed to live in your house and then make the next generation, if you choose to make the next generation. Like, when I start to talk about these things, there's not even a frame of reference for you to receive this information. I'm just hearing you. It's kind of like when you're trying to eat, like, whatever, like dry crackers, like, you have nothing to wash this down with. Like, you need something to wash this down. You're like, what? Like, how do we do this? There's a lot of restoration that needs to happen for women to know what you should even be asking for women to know how you should require the structuring of your society, and for you to know how you should advocate for. None of this is communism or socialism, because I'm not advocating for the government to seize the means of productions. I am really advocating for women to have, like, I guess, ancestral money. Okay, so I guess that's how you would think of it. Like, when wealthy people in your world are born into money, and they do not have to work and have a job in order to have a place to live, they simply are born into it. Women should be born into their houses, and you should not have to work in order to have your house. Of course not. And when I say that, you're all going into, like, blah, 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 and people are lazy and all these things. No. And I'm just, we can do an Ask Me Anything about how things would be restructured. You're probably not going to like it, or you're going to be allergic to a lot of the things that I'm going to tell you about, because some of you are men, and some of you are highly indoctrinated women. You might be like, these questions and answers make me feel uncomfortable. Are you sure this is how the world is supposed to be? And I'm going to say this: the world that is presently as it is makes me feel very uncomfortable, and it needs to change immediately. So I will share with you about my life. So I presently sustain myself in my own life through my artistic efforts and the merits of my own being, through creating art, music, through doing teachings. And also, hold on a second here. I am now going to talk to this person and tell them how bad they are. Apologies for that interruption. Yes. So, how I live my life, I support myself. I don't live clearly with a family member who was, the father of the previous occupant, and I don't have a husband, and I'm not divorced, and I didn't take half of my husband's money or anything like that. Like, I make stuff, and I teach people stuff, and I receive energy from society that celebrates that I make stuff and teach people stuff and do stuff, and produce things and produce dresses and things like that. This is what each one of us is supposed to do as an individual. Like, each one of us is supposed to come here with talents and gifts, be a productive member of society, give something and make a contribution, and then receive what you need as you make that contribution. The idea of treating women as an object that can be purchased or sent to live with someone else after an exchange of a dowry, happens is like inconceivable to me. But that is the way that your present world is set up. The women's engagement ring is meant to be the dowry. Basically, you're coming out of a world where women are not allowed to own property. And although in the feminist world of post-World War II industrialized America, supposedly women are in a state of equality, you're not in a state of equality at all. And women have been hugely exploited. And that's why women are still doing the same problems. And this relates to the criticism, valid critique of Gaia, valid critique of Shekinah, the divine feminine, and valid critique of women. Just because you're indoctrinated from an early age with Disney princess ideology to say, marry well, and then he will take care of you and you'll have a lot of money. You'll live in a nice castle. It's your job to de-indoctrinate yourself. It's your job to be like, that doesn't sound like what I'm really supposed to do. Like, I'm not just supposed to be some pretty object and marry someone who is wealthy but gross, who will give me money, which is what a lot of people seem to think. Like, and then they will be able to purchase plastic surgery, purchase unlikely silicone bozooms and other forms of augmentation. Like that, none of that is what you're supposed to do. All right. That's not how you're supposed to get a man. And that's not what the epitome of female success looks like. And just because you see a lot of women doing that doesn't mean that that is what you are supposed to do. So, and I mean, not every woman here is supposed to, procreate and have a family. Why is there such an over proliferation of the satanic or erroneously created people here? Not every woman is made to have a baby, and not every woman is made to have multiple babies. And for a very long time, that was considered to be you're an object, and that's all that you're made for. It was incorrectly presumed that you didn't come here with a mind. Like, even up into the 1800s, males did not think that women had an intellect or anything in their mind that was to be shared. That was only like 200 years ago. Even up into the 1950s, women were not allowed to own their own credit card. You had to have a man to co-sign with you. And sometimes women could not own their own home. You had to have a man, your husband, your father, co-sign for it. There are still places in the world where women are not allowed to own property or drive or achieve money earning activities. Like, there's still a lot of that going on. Some of it is like, areas of Middle East, Pakistan, and, some areas of Asia. But these disempowerment structures continue to exist. And then, unfortunately, the Western industrialized response known as feminism is completely inadequate and wrong in every way, because the idea is not simply to be completely independent and receiving nothing from men. The idea is that you should have everything, and then you should give to the men that you wish. And that is your choice and your prerogative. And you would not give to men who are like screwed up, badly behaved, dangerous people. You would give to the males who contribute to your society and who help you to live a good life. So in ancient Egypt, there were males. This speaks to everything, not only cleaning up Satanism, but what type of world do you want to create in the world that is, the next chapter for humanity. It's a world where you will probably segue for, at least one generation of like, you'll still have sexual reproduction. How do you want to do sexual reproduction? How do you want to do the dynamics? Do you want to still have the battle of the sexes? Should not. That was all satanic. And you should not have this battle for economic supremacy either. And basically, like, you're going to be on a timeline that's a dead timeline where like humanity becomes the gray aliens if you do not grow and change and reassess some basic foundational dynamics within the society. And because this has to do with making babies, growing families, and reproducing. And please take to heart everything that I said to you about the wild bees from our wonderful retreat. Okay, so I did not have a thing that says, my God, and people are still that stupid person just sent me an email and another text. And then I had already did that to try to block the person. So and the option to block was not there. So please know, like, I am so allergic to technology. I do not need to touch technology extra in the middle of my class to try to deal with this stuff. That is something that people that don't like me would do to me. People that do like me need to treat me a lot better than that. I am really disrupted and very angry right now. Yeah, so I mean, like, let's talk about this. In this world of negative and out of balance social and biological dynamics, like people think like, like at the very least, basically a good relationship is like the least common denominator, And it's like, no, you should have much more than simply like, a person who gives you a house, enough food to eat, and is not physically violent towards you. But for a long time, that was considered to be like, oh, the epitome of a good partner. And it's like, you guys know that has to be a lot more than that, more than just basic survival needs and really positive rapport on levels of the intellect, on levels of your communication style, on levels of your spirituality and your worldview, and so much more. So, you have a very mediocre society right now because people have not been pairing optimally. And then the ones who are wild and feral and who have like an uncontrollable aspect to themselves, and they are divinely inspired, like those people do not need to be diluted by breeding with the non-wild bees, the bees that are already distressed and that they're already not their full selves. You need to be like living in a wild way and not connecting to the people that are already indoctrinated and imprisoned. And the imprisonment is people who like basically work for the corporate infrastructure. They work for bureaucracies. They have a regulated existence. They're in the medical system, and they require that level of regularity. And without that, they think they could die. And then feminism and postmodern feminism has said like, well, the path for freedom for a woman is to participate in that death context, like that you should go to work in the corporate structure and that you should do the same work that males are expected to do in the society. And I'm like, no, that's not good for anyone. The corporate structure is really not good for anyone. So yes, because now you have to look into the Industrial Revolution, and then you have to look into the creation of the farm plow and modern farming equipment. Then you have to look into the way that people did creation of food and land ownership and families back then. And you have to look to an even deeper time. These are things that you have to look into in order to build a better life. So you don't just want regenerative farming, you want no plow farming. This whole thing with hurting the earth every spring is not correct. It's like every spring you're going to scratch the earth and cause these deep injuries, and then wonder why your topsoil is blowing away. Like this, and when I say this is not a non sequitur. Like, why is Aurora all of a sudden talking about farming techniques? Because your corporate infrastructure and your screwed up farming techniques go hand in hand. And why are you spending your time sitting underneath fluorescent lights working for a corporation as opposed to living on your ancestral lands and farming in a house that you own because your mom owned it and then she passed it down to you? And why in the world are you living in an apartment in the city? And why are people who live in an apartment in the city facing such profound levels of infertility? And then also like the promiscuity of sex in these urban areas, and like multiple partners and lack of sanctity of sex. Like this is also a degradation of the sexual act, creating families, creating tribes, creating things that matter. Like you have like dormant, bees mating with all of these other types of bees, and taking away from the specialness of what you could have. Your quest for freedom and your quest for self-determination is completely tied to purging your world of these negative behavior patterns that have been here for a long amount of time. It's really not possible for you to live as a free, wild bee, unencumbered by the matrix, when there are so many other bees that are very screwed up and that are acting badly within your world. And you're facing this need to kind of like have to purge what is not supposed to be here. And then you'll be left with only a very small remnant. Then you'll have to amplify that remnant in a way that is positive. Okay, so I know that I've just laid a very, very heavy trip on all of you. We'll not be talking about more technology stuff because that's very, very draining. And I'm just going to yell at the person in person and whatever. I don't know what to do, block their number. But so I'm open to Q&A about the things that I just said to you. I hope that this never is misinterpreted as mere like Aurora hating on males, because that is not it. You have to know that males existed in ancient Egypt and were an essential part of the family. It was not like the Isle of Lesbos or something like that. It was not just a 100% female homogenous society. Males were there, and males acted very, very differently. And so in the present lens, when you see statues that might be from that time, the woman is presented as being taller and forward, and the man is presented as being like behind. And sometimes the woman is even kind of like protecting him like this, and he's wearing a wig that is in the style of a woman. And like the does not compute. Your modern interpretation lens is like, this doesn't make sense. What is this? These silly old ancient Egyptians, like, what are they doing? Why is this man wearing a female wig? And what does this mean? They'll make up some of the most silly lies in order to cover it up. And the answer is like, the woman was in charge. The way that you presently think of the patriarch is in charge, like who has all the money, who owns the house, who determines who lives under the house. You presently think that that is supposed to be a man, but that is supposed to be a woman. And then if I say that it's supposed to be a woman, then you're like, oh, so then you're going to have the women are in charge, and the women make these stupid wars, and they send off all of the people to die. And like, no, women would never do that. We do not do that. We would not run things in this way. So please, when I say these things, please be aware of the allergic reaction that the inherent part of you that's programmed might feel like, oh, that's not the way we're supposed to do it. It's supposed to be like this. Just be aware of that in any initial resistance, or like I said, an allergy, like an inflammation, that I would even think these forbidden thoughts, that I would even say these things, because it's totally normal. If I'm like, yeah, like the man owns the property and then he passes it down to his sons. But if I say the woman owns the property, all the women own the property, and the women pass it down to their daughters, you're like, I'm so inflamed, I'm so enraged, this can't be. And like that, just think about it. Think about what that would be like. And don't get angry at me. Don't shoot the messenger because I'm saying this, but I'm really saying that that is the way that it is supposed to be. And then if someone wanted to live in the house of a woman, like you have to be really nice to that woman. You can't be like lie to them or steal from them or be physically violent towards them. Like you would have to be very nice to them in order to be able to live with them or to work for them, because of course women own all of the property, including larger companies or corporations. And then when I say that, then you're like, heads are doubly exploding. Like, no, men are supposed to own the corporations. Like your brains are all melting, liquefying. Well, I'd be like, that's the end of class, everyone. See you later. Like scoop up your brains and put them back in your head. Like, if you can imagine this, out of balance with males, you should be able to imagine this in the opposite direction with females, except women would do things much better and in a profoundly different way. Of course, what you presently have are a generation of enslaved women who are used to sexual interactions with the docile bees, the docile males. And so they don't even know how to do this. So I have to kind of tell you that you should be this way and help you to even envision yourself on these levels. But no, you need encouragement. Women need encouragement, and a deprogramming of the errors that were placed into your expectations, and a reprogramming of the truth that should be placed into your expectations. And then if you were that way, then right now, then you would be like, there's no one here for you. You're not going to go on any of the dating sites and find anyone, because you are so beyond the mentality of the males who are on the dating sites here. So please know that once you become recalibrated, you will either have to then recalibrate and deprogram a appropriate group of males, or you will never find partners, because then you will just have an end of the species because of, males who weren't capable of like being able to rise to the occasion and accept that there's now a new power dynamic. But also, just to be clear, is not an effort to simply recreate what once was here, but really is an effort to take what was good from what once was here, take the best and leave the rest. And also, we have to resolve what is going on with the Shekinah, because I recognize that as an ongoing project or an ongoing trauma that must be healed and resolved. And I also said this very clearly to that Shekinah presence when I was driving. I was like this. Okay, look, so you, Shekinah, got taken prisoner and, messed up your mission. And, I'm happy for you to no longer be imprisoned, but you're not in charge around here. And I am in charge around here, because I did not get taken prisoner and I did not mess up my mission, and I have fought back very, very effectively. So I needed to make that very clear. And also because it's my responsibility, basically, what is happening on this planet. And I'm not going to abdicate my responsibility to someone who clearly has already done a bad job. Also, all of the light that is coming to this planet right now is an ascension experience, acceleration experience too, for everyone who is here, including the Shekinah. So there's not a way to be on this planet that is ascending and not be affected by the ascension process. That means resolving trauma and a resolution of the journey of consciousness of that, presence. And it's not supposed to be stuck here. So let's talk about Quetzalcoatl. All right, because you're a civilizing presence. You're supposed to come, kick ass on the barbarians, and then get the F out of here. That is what Quetzalcoatl did. All of these stories of like the blue-eyed, bearded invader, or not invader, sustainer, the savior. So that's Quetzalcoatl was said to be like a snake that was also a bird, was said to be a bearded man with blue eyes, like said to have different viewpoints, images, different ways of presenting itself. Sorry if my brain didn't connect there. Different images, but that it came as a civilizing presence to Mesoamerica, taught the people there how to do stuff, and then flew away. Same thing with the Kachinas of the American Southwest, the area of New Mexico and Arizona. The Kachinas were seen as space invaders. They came for a brief amount of time. They taught the tribe how to do, like White Buffalo Woman, tobacco, agriculture, how not to be a giant jerk face. And then White Buffalo Woman flew away. The Kachinas flew away. They came, they did their thing, and then they left. So this whole idea of the Shekinah coming and then having something imprison or harm her and then staying instead of moving on is very questionable. And so I don't have an answer right now. The answer is that this is all part of what is going on in your world right now, and that her life and her trajectory is going to have to be resolved. If that looks like she goes back to her origin, or if that looks like she goes on to her next chapter, and if that looks like, I don't know if she would have to stay here in order to fix things, but I also kind of feel like, don't feel compelled to stay here, because you have already done enough in energizing a lot of very, very bad spells. Like, every bad spell of every dark magician basically runs off of the Shekinah. That's a lot of bad spells. And all of these injections and subcutaneous pollutions are bad spells. Technology are bad spells. Everything that leads to and encourages your death is a bad spell. The entire death cult religion of Christianity is a bad spell, is a negative spell that is done, in this case, not only hijacking and misappropriating the energy of the divine feminine, but also Christ, the supposed crucifixion and human sacrifice there, this is also a huge misappropriation of that energy too, who the person actually was, and their energy being twisted and distorted and then weaponized against you. So in order for you to be free, both of those things have to be resolved. Whatever energy of hijacking and misappropriation from the avatar that we know as Jesus, and also from the Shekinah, and they both do qualify as a type of avatar or cosmic presence that is here for uplift and improvement. Okay. Okay, so wait. So here, Amy says, so interesting about the women owning the home belongings, as I recently read a book on my American Indian ancestry, and this is how it was done. Absolutely. And it also makes sense. So thank you for that confirmation. And Suzuka says it would make for a more stable society because the babies would be stable. And a balanced female would know that the baby needs the father too. Absolutely. And if the father wasn't a good father, if the father was using resources badly, physically violent, or otherwise not pleasant to be around, the woman would say, you don't get to live in my house. Like, get the F out. You don't get to live in my house. Too many women in the present world are not only in a house, but in a relationship just to live in a house. And this is a very sad truth. Something like 60% of women, if they had to live on their own with their own resources that they earn, they could not do it. They are often in sexual relationships with partners that they are not married to just because they have to live in the same house with them, and the society does not accommodate platonic roommates. They feel that there is some obligation for sexual energy to be shared to be able to live in a space. That is a reprogramming that has to change and shift in women's minds, that you're not obliged to furnish a male with sexual energy to be able to have a place to live. But please comprehend that is a real thing in people's minds, not only in the West and the industrialized world, but also very much in places in Asia and to the east of where I live, places where women have been historically very, very without a voice and disempowered, and that often they feel like they don't get it. In that area of the world, sometimes female babies are killed at birth because there is such an undervaluing of what it is to be a woman. So in that area of the world, they're like, we don't really like women. We treat them as objects, and we even kill them because they're so inconvenient for us to have. That is unimaginable that is going on. And that's going on in 2025, 2026. That is terrible, terrible stuff that you can't have an ascended planet, that going on the planet. So you got to resolve stuff with the Shekinah, but you also have to resolve in every single way in which that human biological femalehood is being exploited or underfunded or misused. And that is the genuine healing that must be addressed. People talk about like save the children, and some good people too. Like people who fell for the QAnon psyop are people who genuinely want to protect children from sexual violence and exploitation, and who really want to fight against what is known as human trafficking or child trafficking. This speaks to the essence of a world in which child trafficking can even exist as an industry. Like Thailand exists as an industry of child trafficking because of the way that people there feel about procreation, sex, motherhood, and making female babies. And the procreation and sex part is at the beginning part of that. And then the making too many female babies part is part of the middle of that. And then now we have too many mouths to feed, let us pimp some of them out to wealthy American tourists is also a part in there somehow. And any male that would go to the end result of, I think we have too many female children, we should either infanticide them or sell them into sexual slavery for American sexual tourists, should not live in your house. That's not a good man. He should not live in your house. These are wrong things that should never be done. So I'm starting to say I'm pointing some very, very critical fingers. These are what it means when I say you have to say all the forbidden things. You have to poke every sacred cow in order to genuinely heal your life and transform your planet and actually ascend. You have to look at these foundational corruptions and imbalances and fix them and stop them immediately. And it's relatively likely to make you uncomfortable. I was going to say they're going to make you uncomfortable. It's relatively likely that they're going to make you uncomfortable, and you must traverse that area of discomfort in order to be able to make these changes. So even government itself, the outsourcing of a power figure is patriarchal, that is not the way that this is supposed to be done. Like, you don't think at all. Like, so when you're in a patriarchal society, you're a woman and you don't own anything, and the man tells you what to do. And then when you are working for corporations, then you are like the worker who's like the woman, and you don't think at all, and you just do what the corporation tells you to do. And then when you have a government, you don't think at all, and you just listen to the government, which is your big daddy, which tells you what to do. You're not supposed to have any of those power dynamics. You're not supposed to have a larger overarching daddy figure who President Trump tells you what to do. You're supposed to be self-directed, and then you're also supposed to direct your own self-economy. And then in your house, you're supposed to have self-direction. And then if you had that, then you would essentially have wild bees who are feral, who do not conform to the dynamics and patterns of these very whatever it is, pacified bees that are not acting in the correct way. And then the pacified bees that believe in the death cult, if it is the Jewish death cult, the Christian death cult, or the Islamic death cult, they're all participating in these disempowerment scenarios that then end with their death and resolution in a type of paradise state. So that is why you have the people who are in Islam thinking that their death will bring them to paradise. That includes people who are labeled as like jihadists or terrorists, but also a lot of people who are in the Palestinian conflict. They're like, I will have 9 babies and they will all die and they're all going to go to heaven because they got to paradise. Like, this is a crazy way of thinking. No mom should think like, I'm going to have 9 babies, that way 9 babies can die and they can all go to Islamic paradise heaven. Should not think that way. And also, you should not think that way in the Christian levels where they were like, I will have this many babies and some of them will go and fight for the Crusades or join the United States military. And then they will, be destroyed in a shooting war. And then that's essentially a sacrifice, given things to be destroyed. All right. So I have definitely beaten this dead horse to the point of completeness. All right. So we're totally done with this. You're all like, yes, Aurora, we definitely hear what you're saying. Good. I'm glad that I was able to articulate that for you. So now next week, I'm going to do galactic history. It was necessary for me to really articulate and bring some fresh insight into the problems that are in your world. And then next week, I will do the whole Megillah and tell you all about from even where did these guys come from Mars? What was their mentality, mind state, how that mind state came to this world and created the imbalances that we're talking about, and then also how to resolve all of this. I always talk about self-defense, fighting the dark wizards, and it's always growing and changing every year. So for a long time the transhumanists were the ones that you had to fight, but I think I've done such a good job at destroying a lot of that transhumanist infrastructure over 2025, that now you're pretty much back to just fighting against the satanic guys. But that's a deeply entrenched part of human culture, for a very long amount of time. But now you're getting to like the real stuff. The stuff of the past 5 years was like temporary stuff, valid, perilous, but not the foundation. Now you're down to the foundation of what got screwed up in your world, and the foundation of the story of what was wrong in humanity. And Judeo-Christianity, and talking about the Garden of Eden and things that went wrong in that point, is erroneous, because you did have a time when it was balanced between the two sexes, and that was after Atlantis. So the Bible tries to tell you that you went from the Garden of Eden and a beautiful, perfect time, which is Atlantis, straight into inequality, toiling for farm, and also toiling for your babies. And that skips over the beautiful matriarchy world when you farmed in a different way and had babies in a way that was not painful. And so it is possible to consider that in the next chapter for reality. We want to have a world without money, and we want to be able to transcend food and eat pure light, and of course, transcend physical reproduction. But you might be in this transitionary mode where I think it's important for you to be able to envision a balanced world where the sexes, the genders are balanced, where there's love and reciprocity, where there's genuine family building, where there's genuine community building. And then out of that, then you're able to transition to a time where you don't do agriculture and you don't eat physical food and you don't make babies in this way, but you might have to be restored before you're able to do that, or you might be able to go directly there. We'll have to see what is really possible. But I would like for you to know, like, I'm not offering and presenting to you a world that is sanitized of all males. No, just like the guy, wild bee guy, wasn't saying that you have to get rid of all male bees, but you should get rid of the diluted, not good genetic structures. And essentially, they kind of peter out, or they leave the planet themselves due to their non-vital nature. So Mary Ellen, please do unmute yourself and ask anything, because I think you just raised your hand.
Oh, sorry. That was
Not
just
at
a
all.
mistake, but that's okay.
Don't
I
worry at all. But good to hear
so
your voice.
can you just discuss a little bit, because it's late,
Yes,
the Y chromosome?
I would love to. No problem at all.
Is that something that was genetically modified, or
Yo, girl, it's a can of worms. The answer is a big fat yes. So the Y chromosome and the presence of the Y chromosome is an inherent truthfulness about the genetic modification that has happened to humanity throughout the ages. But humans are so indoctrinated and entrenched, and male culture is so predominant in research science that these are forbidden questions to even ask. So here's one big aspect of this. The X chromosome is big. Imagine that I'm the X chromosome. It's the size of my whole entire torso. The size of the Y chromosome is like the size of my hand. It's tiny. It is very small. And that means that it used to be bigger and there was more stuff and more genetic stuff associated with it. And now it's small. But these research scientists are all males. And so they're not able to be like, I think that guys, I think there's something wrong with the Y chromosome. Like, why is it so small? Be like, who are you saying my Y chromosome is small? This is 12 inches of Y chromosome right here. Don't be measuring smaller. Like, you understand there's a lot of Y chromosome inadequacy and stuff that's going on. And I'm joking about this, but it's something that we have to approach with humor. So many questions that aren't even allowed to be asked in the levels of that academia and the worlds of indoctrination. But the answer is the Y chromosome, as you presently know it, is the end result of a huge amount of degradation that's gone on over tens of hundreds of thousands of years, very long amount of time. So during the chromosome splitting process, when the cell is in mitosis, my hands are now chromosomes. What they do is they line up according to magnetic field lines of energy, and they are restored. If there are breakages or malfunctions or transcriptional errors, it's in that moment that the DNA is restored, so that way you don't pass on a lot of junk and garbage and errors to the next generation. But the Y chromosomes are the only chromosomes that aren't restored in that way. So if you're a male, all of your other chromosomes are being restored when you do cell division, except for your Y chromosome, which gets successively worse and worse with every generation. It never heals its trauma. It gets continually dumped with extra trauma and extra errors, and it never gets fixed. And it appears almost as if the motivation of reproduction in your world right now is for the unhealed Y chromosome to continually find the next partner or victim that it can be inserted into. At the end result, the logical conclusion of many multiple new generations, there will not be a Y chromosome anymore. And so the scientists that run research in your universities and labs at this point are starting to recognize that. And they're like, if things keep going on like this, the Y chromosome is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller, and then eventually disappear. What's going to happen to us men? What will happen? What will this look like? And the answer is maleness will not disappear. There's already this rodent that comes from Japan where the Y chromosome has already evolved away. It's already become vestigial and disappeared. But you still have half of the rat population has penis and testes, and half of the rat population has uterus, vagina, and ovaries. And they reproduce and they make the next generation. So Y chromosome does not equal expression of sexual characteristics in the biological realm known as men, known as maleness. Y chromosome does contain pathogenic genes and genes for sociopathy and non-healthy, non-socially positive behavior. Things like sexual violence, the tendency to power abuse, the need to exploit others, a lot of stuff about resource insecurity, gaining more than others, using resources over others, some of these things that are obviously not socially positive characteristics that have been associated with maleness throughout the past 6,000 years. It's actually not inherently male. It is inherently male to be generous, wise, loving, and protective over your family. These are what the males were like in ancient Egypt. And they were contributors who made a beautiful world with us, as opposed to the scammer of the Y chromosome grifter. That's like, oh, no one would let me come to this party. Here's me. I'm a Y chromosome scamming grifter. Like, no one would let me come in as a welcome guest. I'm going to have to force my way in or lie, and then I'll somehow get in there. So this has been many, many generations of the Y chromosome either forcefully inserting itself into the next generation or grifting, lying in some way. I do not agree to this lying. When someone's on a date, you should be authentic. A lot of guys think like you have to sit through some movie that you don't really like The Princess Bride or something like that, to make the girl like you. Then she'll have sex with you. Then you can have a baby that you don't love and that you don't really take care of because you lied. Like, this girl should sleep with you because she likes you, not because you lied about her favorite movie. But that is considered somehow socially acceptable in your world. How much do you have to lie to a woman to be able to let her sleep with you so you can make a baby with them? That's not right. You should be authentic. And I used to watch the Seinfeld show, and I'd be like, why do you lie to your lover? Like, because that's how they do it. They lie to get women into bed, and then the women lie about having orgasms. And I was very shocked and horrified that this is even normal in your world, but that is not what is supposed to be going on. And the infertility that's in your world right now is because men lie about what's their favorite movie and whether they actually like a woman, and women lie about whether they are genuinely having orgasm. The Shekinah must take responsibility for herself. The divine feminine principle and the planet Gaia must take responsibility for herself. Women need to take responsibility for themselves. Women need to, in this moment, stop being with or under the house of a man that they don't love or respect, or lying about their orgasm or their levels of sexual satisfaction to stay with a man that does not satisfy them. And you're also in a difficult situation because some of you might be currently gestating or raising babies that came out of bad relationships that weren't loving. And then what are you going to do? I don't want you to get rid of your kids. That's not a healthy, positive thing to do. But everybody has to seriously reassess how you do things going forward. So some things are going to have to be grandfathered in because you're like, oh, I had that kid with that guy and this wasn't great or whatever. You're all going to have to figure out how you resolve all of that. But please don't make any more junk. And that's the same message that I said to the Shekinah. Like, I'm cleaning up a lot of stuff that's in time, a lot of events, a lot of people, a lot of non-optimum things. And just please don't make my life more difficult by making more junk or matter and energy out of place. All right. So from this moment going forward, women, like, please do not make more undesired pregnancies. Please do not make more undesired offspring. Please do not accommodate more sexual partners that aren't really ideal for you because you think you need to have a house to live in by sleeping with a man. None of this works. It never worked in previous levels of society. But now when I talk about a new start, like a new chapter, like, you can't continue with the former levels of dysfunction. If you try to do the old dysfunction going forward into the new thing, it will be a non-starter from the beginning. So there must be a radical reassessment within each one of you, and definitely how you train your daughters and how you exemplify to your daughters. So one of the things that made me so allergic was looking at Erica Kirk. I mean, not only is she a psyop unto herself and, an artificially created person and not in a real relationship and has rent-a-kids, but apart from all of that, the idea that she would somehow be a mentor to other women about how to be a traditional wife, what are your values, how you should act and raise your girls to be good wives, and that was a whole psyop for like The Handmaid's Tale, like Christian conservative teachings of like how to be a good wife. Like, I am just like throwing up a little bit just even thinking about that. Like, no, she's not qualified. None of those teachings would have been good. Like, none of that is good. But you do, women need to have an upgrade in your assessment of what it is to be a good woman, what it is to be a good wife, and also how you teach your daughters to be good daughters, because none of you should be settling for non-optimum relationships with males. None of you should be settling for sexual reproduction with someone who you don't really love because it's convenient or a convenience or a necessity. You should only be with someone that you dearly love. All right. That's the critical thing here. When you're with someone that you love, you put that love into the next generation. And you have had, the best way of saying it is, many, many generations of loveless marriages. And sometimes marriages do not have sexual violence or physical violence. And you might have grown up in those households where you're like, oh yeah, nothing was wrong in my family, but it might have been a loveless marriage where people just used to get married because it was the thing that you do, and then you have babies because it's the thing that you do, and then the parents are like, oh, like I have this child here, like kind of holding it at a distance, like what do I do with you? Like send them to a daycare, send them to the school, send them to college. Like no, it's because a loveless marriage or a loveless family, that's the essence of Satanism. That's the essence of taking this divine feminine principle of creating life and creating families and creating these, like, I just keep using that word loveless, but it's like a very meh, very mediocre, very mids, very meh, like nothing, really nothing that extraordinary. Okay, so Michelle Michelangelo says, love to you and all here. Thank you so much. And Joyce says, thank you, Professor. Love and appreciate you immensely. Glad the retreat was a success. Love to you and Miss Cheeky too. Thank you so much. Thank you for including Cheeky. Cheeky did fantastically well. And this is our 4th time that we went out and back to Sedona. So she earned some kind of like a supreme merit badge for like dogs being good in the car. She definitely deserves that. So thank you for all the love. And we both needed actually a couple of days to just kind of get our energy back and to get ready. My voice was very tired. So I'm still not up to 100%, but I wanted to be able to share some of these recent insights. And Suzuka says, yeah, I never had another child after I saw what I had done. Well, I would also like for women, to release guilt, because many women that I've talked to over the past, whatever, I've been here for over 20 years, and I've helped women and I've been in sessions with them. And some women are so hard on themselves about their relationships, their children, what their children went on to be, whether or not they had abortions or whether they carried a pregnancy to term. Like, please do not torture yourself about these things. It's so unfair to torture yourself about, having an abortion or ending a pregnancy. You might have been preventing yourself from carrying one of these unloved expressions into the world. You might have been doing something positive, but also you should not just get pregnant 20 million times and then just have a bunch of abortions, which is what a lot of young women do, unfortunately, because they are treating sex like my other unfavorite show, Sex in the City, which is just considered to be this immature, like a recreational activity and not something that is sacrosanct. So you can't have that either. So women who had abortions, please don't rake yourself over the coals for ending your pregnancy. But also women who are promiscuous, you should not be promiscuous. You should do things for love. But then promiscuity, as it was presented by the campuses, like on college campuses, was supposedly something that was free and empowering for you as a woman. That's part of the lie of feminism, but it's not. Well, now I have to talk about other stuff too. And I skipped over my teaching all about sexuality this year, but I do have a level 2 curriculum all about sexuality. And basically it goes like this. It is the male prerogative biologically to have many multiple partners because they get energy from all of the women that they connect to. So the men do not have a uterus. They don't have a well. They don't have access to water. The women have the well. It's your uterus. And if men want to get water from the well, they have to get it from the woman, right? So feminism benefits the men because it allows them to have multiple partners and go to all these different wells. But feminism really does not benefit a woman, because if you have 32 partners, that's 32 men that are taking the energy from your well, and then you have less and less and less. So part of this is also the biological imperative of women should want to have fewer partners and keep their energy sacrosanct, whereas males are more motivated to travel the world, spread their seed, have as many women as they can. But women have to be empowered to say, no, no, I don't want to do that with you. And men might go around to 12 million different women, be like, can I have sex with you? Everyone's going to say, no, because I don't want you to take energy from my well. Go sail somewhere else. Like that's the key that you should be able to do. That has not been possible in a lot of times and places because the males come as invaders and they do not ask, they require. And so they say, I want to have many, many multiple partners. I am here to rape you now. And that is what has happened. None of this is acceptable. So in modern feminism, women need to be able to learn that having many partners does not equal freedom. It actually equates to a huge disempowerment and weighs a person down a lot. You should try to have the fewest number of partners that you possibly can have. And that is why there is such a thing as pair bonding, which is where you have a lifetime partner, or at least a partner from when your children are tiny to the time that they're adults, and then you end the relationship and then you part your ways. Like that you should not be like with someone new every 2 or 5 years. This is not optimum for women at all, but it's very optimum for men. And so you're going to have to change and renegotiate everything about the way that you do things here. Once again, have compassion for yourself. If you're a woman and you regret either your pregnancies or your relationships, please love that that was the best that you knew at the time. Now you know better and you do better. And key point is you teach young girls to do better. All right. And I hopefully exist as a template for something completely different in this world. I've always known as I came into this world that I'm not here for traditional levels of sexuality and procreation. You must have a place in your world for women that are like me. In the past, there was no place in your world for women who were not sex objects or made to be procreated with. You did have a place for men who were like that. A man could be a professor, an artist, an educator, a person who doesn't have a family, like Sir Isaac Newton or something like that. But for many, many, a long time in your world, it was not considered that that is a role that a woman can be or do. Like you're just going to play the piano, like be a concert piano player and not have a family. And that there are aspersions, being like, that's not allowed, you're not good enough, you're not a real woman, or maybe you're gay. And all of those things are not okay. And that, you should be able to make a choice about whether you have babies or not. And that maybe you come here and that that's not your job, but it might be a great job for other women who do want to have babies. Totally acceptable. Totally acceptable. And so I am hoping to present that as a different way of being to people, not just to women specifically, not just to calibrate to the baseline normal, which is like you will get pregnant when you're 16 because you're fertile, and then you will spend the next 20 years taking care of your child. If that is good for you, then do that. But please know that that is not the only thing that it is possible to be. And it is possible to be very, very different in this world. So when I've talked with some women who have always been serially in relationships and in marriages and raising their babies, they have told me like, oh yeah, like when I wasn't in a relationship or whatever, I did so much artwork. They've told this to me, like one particular woman who was like, a realtor or whatever. She was like, oh yes, like when I wasn't married or in a partnership, I would be making, fabric appliques, embroideries, and decorating the entire place, decorating the whole thing. Like, when someone is not drawing upon the well of energy in your uterus, you have a lot of energy to do a lot of stuff with. And then when you are busy raising a family, your energy goes into the creation of food, the social care that you give to raising your children, and a lot of other things that you manifest like for your family, because you're like, we need stuff for the family. We're going to need a baby stroller and a high chair and all these things. You manifest that for your family. Women often even use the energy of their womb to manifest an upgraded professional opportunity for their husband. They're like, oh, you're having babies now, you're going to need a promotion at work. They use their energy, like their esoteric emotional energy, to envision their husband rising higher at work. And this would be a good partnership if the husbands were like, thank you for helping me to rise higher at work. I will now make sure that you have everything that you need. And if we get divorced, give you lots of money. Like, this is the way it's supposed to be, but it's not always the way it is supposed to be. So sometimes men are like, thank you very much. I have all of the money. You have nothing, and I will give you nothing. And that is not a good way to be. That is not the way that we would have done things in ancient Egypt. And in ancient Egypt, you would never have something that is like a pregnancy of a person, like you have a baby and it doesn't have a home. You would never have that. You would always have like conscious pregnancies celebrated, and people want to take care of those children. And also, you would never have children who are sacrificed to a dark evil, like a Moloch, some kind of baby eater, Saturn. We did not have that then. You did not have that then. You only had desired children who were celebrated in the world, and you didn't have soldiers that were sent off to war, crusades, and you didn't have children who were eaten by evil monsters. We got to reclaim that way. All right. We got to reclaim that way. Um, all right, so let's wrap things up. Joyce says, by the way, I've got 8 months off cigarettes. I think, Joyce, that is an amazing accomplishment, worthy of recognition, worthy of cheers. Please keep going. You're doing amazing, doing very, very good things for yourself by doing that. Suzuka says, thank you, Aurora. Thank you, Chiki, for sharing your Aurora with us. You're very, very welcome. Thank you for the beautiful social support that I get from being here. And thank you for letting me be an equal opportunity offender. Today, I offended both Jews, Christians, and Islam people. I don't know if I offended Buddhists enough today, but I will try harder another time. And let's wrap things up. So next week, same bat time, same bat channel, except it will be the extremely long presentation where I will go through all of galactic history for us. And then I'm going to squint and make ridiculous faces while I look at my calendar. So that's January 14th. And then, so for January 21st and the 28th and going forward for the next couple of weeks, what I'm going to do is Path of Light. This Path of Light is so awesome. And it's great to talk about just light and not have to talk about baby eating for a little while. So let's do that. Good. All right, cool. And Path of Light is usually 4 weeks. So then after I do Path of Light, then we'll start from the beginning of Lessons for Full Spectrum Humans again. So that's the beginning of February. So if you are a new person and you've just jumped on board for Lessons for Full Spectrum Humans, you're kind of coming in at the end of the semester. You know, I'm always going to just roll things over and roll things over and go forward. And, so you can just hop on board and stay on board. And for anybody who has been thinking of hopping on board, now is a perfect time. And Aurelia says, yes, Path of Light. Here we go. That's the good stuff. Totally. So Mary Ellen says, good night. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you so much. And thank you for allowing me this, extracurricular sharing for today. Challenging material to be sure, but essential for preparing the way so that we plant the seeds for next week's lecture. Okay, beautiful. Have a beautiful night, everyone. Thank you so much. Positive lessons to you. Thank you.